right, folks, we will get started here. Let's reconvene the City Council meeting of Monday, October 28th, 2024. Clerk Fuentes, if you would please call the roll.
Thank you, Council President. Council President Pro Tem LaCava, Councilmember Campbell, Councilmember Whitburn, Councilmember Foster. My apologies. Councilmember Von Wilper, present. Councilmember Lee, Councilmember Campillo,
Here.
Councilmember Moreno, and Council President Elo Rivera.
Present.
Also attending the meeting are Assistant City Attorney Jean Jordan, Independent Budget Analyst Charles Modica, Council Affairs Advisor in the Mayor's Office, Coda Zeiser, and myself, your City Clerk, Diana Fuentes.
All right. Thank you, Clerk Fuentes. We've got a quorum. Do we have any mayor, council, city attorney, independent budget analyst, or city clerk comments? Right, hearing none, let's proceed with the public testimony procedures, please.
Thank you. I will now go over how the public can offer their public testimony during this afternoon's meeting. If you are in person, please complete a speaker slip located at the entrance of chambers and place it on top of the box indicated at the high lectern at the front of the room. Please submit your speaker slips in a timely manner to ensure proper meeting management. Council ambassadors are available near the entrance of chambers and can assist with questions and speaker slips. No further in-person testimony will be taken once the council begins virtual testimony. If you would like to participate virtually, you can do so via the webinar information found on the agenda cover page. Members of the public who wish to provide virtual testimony must enter the virtual queue by raising their hand by either dialing *9 or pressing the raise your hand icon before the queue closes. The queue will close when the last virtual speaker finishes speaking or 5 minutes after in-person testimony ends, whichever occurs first. For purposes of today's meeting, the order of business is anticipated to be as follows. And you can see this on the slide shown. Item 200, which is an informational item. Item 201, item S400, which is an informational item, followed by non-agenda public comment. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. All right. Let's begin with item 200. If our presenter would like to introduce yourselves and let us know which time you'd like for your presentation.
Thank you. Item 200 is the fiscal year 2024 year-end financial performance report. If you'd like to speak to this item, please be sure to raise your hand by pressing *9 or the raise your hand icon if you're participating remotely. And if you are here in council chambers, please be sure to submit your speaker slip to the high lectern. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council President Elo Rivera and council members. I'm Ben Battaglia, Assistant Director with the Department of Finance. With me today is Rolando Charvel, Director of Finance, and Chris Purcell, Financial Operations Manager. We're here to present the fiscal year 2024 year-end financial performance report. We'll need about 10 minutes today.
Please proceed.
This report compares unaudited revenue and expenditure activity to the projections included in the fiscal year 2024 third quarter budget monitoring report. The report includes significant general fund variances from the third quarter report, an update on the January 2024 storm event expenditures, the status of the general fund balance and reserves, significant variances for non-general fund revenues and expenditures, as well as the status of non-general fund and risk management reserves. The development of this report was a team effort. I want to thank all departments for their contributions. We have requested key departments to attend today to help assist with any questions you may have. I'll now turn it over to Chris to walk us through the specifics.
Here we have a high-level summary of the general fund's performance compared to the third quarter projections. Revenues are expected to end the fiscal year $4.6 million above projections, while expenditures are expected to be $18 million lower than projected in the third quarter report. When combined, the total variance for both revenues and expenditures was $22.6 million, or roughly 0.5%. Based on these unaudited actuals, it is now anticipated that the general fund will end the fiscal year with a negative $23.8 million in net projected activity, which is an improvement from the projected negative $46.4 million included in the third quarter report. Regarding the negative net projected activity, as you will recall, the fiscal year 2024 budget was balanced, assuming the use of $72.2 million in excess equity. But based on the activity through fiscal year end and mitigation actions taken during this fiscal year, the city was able to preserve $48.3 million of that planned usage for potential use in future fiscal years. Here we have a breakdown of major general fund revenue performance as compared to the third quarter projections. The unaudited actuals are expected to be $4.2 million or 0.3% more than previously projected. This can be attributed to a $3.7 million increase in other major revenues, primarily due to increased interest earnings, an earlier than anticipated reimbursement from FEMA public assistance, and additional reimbursements for state mandated programs. offset by the delayed refund of forfeited funds from our savings plan provider now expected to be received in fiscal year 25. Also, $2 million increase in property tax, primarily due to higher collections from the sale of new property and an increase in residual tax sharing revenue from the redevelopment property tax trust fund. These increases are partially offset by a decrease of $1.7 million in transient occupancy tax revenue due to a delay in the receipt of select TOT tax remittances, which are now anticipated to be received in fiscal year 2025, as well as a softening demand for leisure travel. Total departmental revenues are expected in the fiscal year approximately $400,000 or 0.1% above the amount projected in the third quarter. This net increase is comprised of increases of $1.2 million in the fire rescue, $2.1 million in parks and recreation, and $2.8 million in transportation department, primarily due to increased reimbursements for services provided, such as strike team deployments, maintenance costs for parks and open spaces, slurry seal and CIP projects, and an increased transfer from the gas tax fund. These are offset by decreases of $1.7 million in police and $4.3 million in real estate and airport management due to delayed payment for services provided at special events and a new towing contract, as well as reduced lease and concession revenue from Mission Bay and Pueblo lands. General fund expenditures are expected to end the fiscal year $18 million or 0.9% below the projections in the third quarter report. While there are overall savings, the general fund is expected to exceed projections in the categories related to staffing, which is $4.8 million increase in personnel expenditures and a $3.2 million increase in fringe benefits. These are offset with savings of $26 million in other non-personnel expenditures spread across numerous departments and categories. Here we see a summary of the categories tied to staffing levels of the city, which shows that unaudited actuals are expected to exceed the third quarter projections by a combined $8 million or 0.6%. Personnel expenditures are anticipated to exceed the third quarter projections by $4.8 million, primarily due to increases in the overtime and hourly categories. For overtime, this is primarily within the fire rescue department and was needed to maintain constant sworn staffing resulting from additional attrition and backfill for leave time taken, continuing education, and training requirements, as well as increased reimbursable deployments. The hourly increase is primarily within fire rescue and parks and recreation departments. In fire rescue, this was needed to support seasonal lifeguard staffing, and in parks and recreation, this was needed to support summer programming, as well as to support department operations due to vacancies. These increases were partially offset by savings in the salaries category, above what the Department of Finance assumed in our historical savings adjustment in the third quarter. And this is across numerous departments and primarily due to prolonged recruitment efforts due to mitigating actions that were taken, as well as additional unanticipated vacancies. The $3.2 million increase in fringe benefits is primarily due to increased workers' compensation contributions and differences between what was assumed for new employees and what they would elect for flexible benefits and the actual selections. When excluding fringe benefits, non-personnel expenditures are anticipated in the fiscal year $18 million below what was projected in the third quarter. As seen on the table, savings are in all categories with the exception of capital expenditures, and that was the result of actuals posting different from how they were projected. The largest decrease was in contracts and services, totaling $14.5 million, and is primarily due to a reduced contribution to the Public Liability Operating Fund, a refund from the county for the March election, the elimination of the central jail rent payment, the deferral of misdemeanor booking payments, and lower ancillary costs and alternative funding for homelessness services. The savings in energy and utilities are due to reduced water use due to paused irrigation, savings in streetlights and traffic signal energy cost, and an overall decrease in energy cost than what was assumed. There were also savings in information technology, transfers out, and supply categories, and these are results of savings in the non-discretionary IT fixed costs, a decrease in the transfer to the park improvement funds due to the decrease in Mission Bay revenues previously noted, and the deferral of supply purchases into fire academies and other safety equipment. Here is the final update on the January storm event and its impacts on the fiscal year 24 actuals. The total impact on fiscal year 2024 is expected to be $16.5 million, which aligns with what was projected in the third quarter report. This total includes $10.2 million in overtime and non-personnel expenditures, which were mostly supported by the $10 million approved by the City Council in the mid-year report, which has now been fully exhausted, with the $231,000 of eligible expenditures supported through other savings. The remaining $6.2 million was supported through the budgeted salaries and wages and fringe benefits provided to departments as part of their base budget. It should be noted that the costs summarized in this table do not include CIP-related expenses, potential wetland mitigation costs from the emergency channel maintenance, or other expenses that may be required in fiscal year 25 or future fiscal years. Here, we see the changes from the third quarter to the unaudited year-end actuals and the impacts on the general fund balance and reserves. Based on the unaudited actuals, the general fund now expects to end the fiscal year with a negative net projected activity of $23 million, which is an improvement of $22.6 million from what was projected in the third quarter report, and an improvement of $48.3 million from what was assumed when the fiscal year 24 budget was developed. It is now expected that the general fund will end the fiscal year with $105 million of excess equity. Of this amount, it should be noted that $84.4 million has already been programmed for use in support of the fiscal year 25 budget, which would leave an estimated $20.6 million that may be needed to address expenditures deferred from fiscal year 24 to 25 and requested in subsequent budget monitoring reports, or through the fiscal year 26 budget development process. For reserves, the emergency and stability reserves in the fiscal year with a combined balance of $207.1 million, which remains unchanged from fiscal year 23. This is equivalent to 13.1% of operating revenues, which falls below the targets identified in the city reserve policy, and is a result of the decision to suspend contributions in the current fiscal year in order to preserve excess equity as a resource to support the fiscal year 25 and future fiscal year budgets. To conclude, revenues came in above projections and expenditures ended the fiscal year below projections for a combined variance of roughly 0.5%. This has resulted in improvement in the net projected activity, $22.6 million when compared to the third quarter report. Excess equity is now estimated to be $105 million at year end, with $84.4 million of that already programmed to support the fiscal year 25 budget. This leaves $20.6 million that would be available to address deferred expenditures as part of requests in future budget monitoring reports, or as part of the fiscal year 26 and future budget development processes in order to address anticipated structural budget deficits. Updated projections will be completed in December with the release of the 5-year financial outlook after the city knows the results of the sales tax measure, and this will help inform the best fiscally responsible and strategic uses of these funds. That concludes this presentation. We are available to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. We'll now turn to the IBA for their analysis.
Great, thank you to Chris, Ben, Rolanda. Thank you, Council President and council members. Our office released a report reviewing the year-end report, as well as providing some additional context on the numbers and projections that you see in there. To present that review, we have Sergio Alcalde and Jordan Moore here from our office. We have other folks in our office available for questions as well, and I think we need about 8 minutes.
Thank you, Charles. Members of the council, Jordan Moore with the Office of the IBA. Our report on the year end, as Charles noted, was released last Tuesday. In general, our report covers the significant variances in general fund revenues and expenditures, but we would note we put an additional focus in our report on comparing year-end actuals all the way to the adopted budget as well as to the third quarter projection. The revenue discussion focuses on major general fund revenues, while the expenditure discussions mainly focus on variances for salaries and wages, with a particular focus on public safety overtime. We also, in our report, provide updates on homelessness programming and expenditures, various reserves, and provide more context on the updated excess equity projections. As noted by DOF, general fund revenues increased by $4.2 million over the third quarter projections. But by the end of the year, revenues actually were $31.9 million higher than what was in the FY 2024 adopted budget. The largest increase, as you see on this table, was in the other major revenues category, and included mitigation actions such as swapping cash for debt in the CIP, as well as receiving proceeds from the Monsanto settlement early. I will note most of the changes in the major revenues category were things that we knew about even prior to the third quarter report. For the 4 major revenues, there was mixed experience over the whole year, with modest increases in property taxes and franchise fees, offset by decreases in sales tax and TOT. Sales taxes in particular experienced a significant lag in growth, underattaining their projected growth rate in 3 out of 4 quarters last year, and ending with actuals that were actually below the actuals from FY 2023. The continued weak growth at the end of FY 24 has also led the city sales tax consultant to lower sales tax projections for FY 25. Our office will continue to monitor potential changes in sales tax and TOT growth with the release of the first quarter report for FY 2025 next month. Now I'll pass it to Sergio.
Thank you, Jordan. For general fund expenditures, year-end actuals came in $27.1 million less than the adopted budget. This is largely due to a $44.9 million decrease in non-personnel expenditures. Several of the largest decreases include fiscal year 2025 mitigation action by transferring $14 million in debt service expenses to the infrastructure fund, $9 million in energy and utility savings, and $9 million in decreased public liability fund contributions. Additionally, there was an $11.8 million decrease in fringe expenditures, largely due to a shift in the city's methodology for paying down its retiree healthcare benefit. These decreases were offset by $29.6 million expenditure increase in salaries and wages, primarily due to higher than budgeted overtime spending, which I'll review briefly in the next slide. For fiscal year 2024, year-end overtime expenditures were $24.3 million over the adopted budget, with the fire rescue and police departments comprising over half of the total overtime cost overages. Fire rescue ended the fiscal year exceeding their overtime budget by $5.6 million. This overage is primarily due to fire suppression staffing shortfalls and backfill overtime. With 55 current sworn staffing vacancies, the department does not anticipate reaching full staffing until the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2026. This is a noteworthy change from the third quarter report, which anticipated that full staffing would be reached in fiscal year 2025. The council may wish to hear more information from the department regarding its current sworn staffing situation, changes that have occurred since the third quarter report, and their outlook for the fiscal year 2025 and beyond. We're also recommending that the fire rescue department evaluate whether there is a need to restore the third fire academy, which was reduced in fiscal year 2020 and the fiscal year 2025 adopted budget, and provide regular staffing reports, at least monthly, to help our office and council track progress towards full staffing. The police department exceeded its overtime budget by $7.9 million. This overage is primarily due to continued sworn staffing shortages. The department hopes to meet its fiscal year 2025 overtime budget, which is $10.9 million less than the fiscal year 2024 actual expenditures, by implementing the city auditor's recommendation to move towards centralized planning of overtime. That said, this will likely be difficult to achieve given the substantial budget reduction from fiscal year 2024. Regarding homelessness programs, the Homelessness Strategies and Solutions Department's total year-end expenditures came in below third quarter projections. Of note, the department's general fund expenses were $2 million below projections. This includes $1.2 million less from ancillary cost savings attributed to the reconfiguration of security services, lower than projected contract costs at the Safe Sleeping O-Lot, and the over budgeting of energy and utilities for 2 city leased facilities. Additionally, expenses related to the Homelessness Housing Assistance and Prevention State Grant were $3.4 million below third quarter projections. These lower expenditures are partially attributed to shelter staff vacancies, despite staffing rates improving in recent years due to the city and the Housing Commission's efforts. We'll now discuss the general fund reserve. To preserve excess equity, the mayor proposed waiving the fiscal year 2024 general fund reserve contribution. With this waiver, the reserve will remain at the fiscal year 2023 balance of $207.1 million, which is $8.4 million below the city's reserve policy target. Per the year-end report, excess equity as of June 30th, 2024 was $105 million. We note of this amount, 84.4 has been identified and utilized to balance the fiscal year 2025 budget, leaving $20.6 million in available excess equity. I'll now hand it back to Jordan to cover the remaining slides.
Thanks, Sergio. So our last content slide covers the public liability reserve, and in particular, an interfund loan from this reserve to the sewer funds to cover a short-term subsidy for the sewer funds for industrial wastewater control permit fees. The fees for the industrial wastewater control permit program are being phased in, but due to the phase-in, they require a subsidy from another fund to keep the sewer funds whole. To date, $3.4 million has been transferred to the sewer fund, resulting in the reserve for the public liability fund being lower than the policy target by that same amount. We've been told additional transfers could happen over the next 2 years, which would further increase the gap between the actual public liability reserve and the policy target. Repayment of these transfers would not occur until FY 2027, and even then, the plan is to have the sewer funds pay these back over a 5-year period. Future industrial wastewater control permit fees will also need to be adjusted to incorporate these future return payments to these funds starting in FY 2027. In conclusion, the year-end report is largely positive, with additional excess equity available due to a combination of higher revenues and lower expenditures. However, particularly on the revenues, there are anticipated impacts that could worsen the overall budget picture for FY 2025 that should be kept in mind, particularly on sales tax proceeds. To that end, the next update on both FY 2025 and future years will be in both the first quarter report for 25 and the next 5-year financial outlook, both of which will be released prior to the end of this calendar year. We thank you for your attention, and we are also available for any questions that you may have for the Office of the IBA. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. With that, let's hear public comment, please.
We have no public comment here in council chambers for this item, and I see one person with their hand raised in the virtual comment. I've started the 5-minute timer. The original, if you can please unmute.
Dang, you guys almost got away with no speakers. Yeah, so.
My apologies. If you can, please, one just came in from Sandy Miskowski.
Okay.
My apologies. Thank you so much for your patience. I'll set your timer to 2 minutes if you can please unmute.
Thank you. Trying to decide which item to speak about on this. My name is Sandy Miskowski with Lived Experience Advisors. I have to bring up, we know that homelessness needs to be our top priority in our city, and that we don't have enough shelter beds for our residents that are seeking shelter every day. We don't have enough shelter beds for our residents that are entering homelessness every day, and we need to prioritize preserving the beds that we're about to lose. And we also need to talk about what's going on in our safe camping site in Balboa Park at the O-Lot. We know that Balboa Park is the jewel of our city. It's a wildlife refuge for our diverse wildlife in the city, and it's a site for scientific study. And what is happening there is we have a major rat infestation in our O-Lot safe camping site. We know that because this is in the middle of Balboa Park, this is also a wildlife management issue. We cannot just hire an exterminator to poison all the rats in the O-Lot, because that would create an ecologic catastrophe in Balboa Park with all of our wildlife. So I'm asking here, because we're listening to the budget analysis, that we must prioritize addressing the rat problem at the O-Lot. We cannot abandon our residents that are currently sheltered at the O-Lot and leave them living with a rat infestation. That has to be calculated and managed through collaboration with multiple partners in our city, including Balboa Park and wildlife experts. I'm asking you, please, if you can take into consideration prioritizing this issue as our government, city leadership. We can't pass the buck and pretend that the service providers just have to hire exterminators, because that's not going to be a solution to this problem. We can't abandon our neighbors there. We don't have enough shelter beds. We are not able to help our neighbors seeking shelter beds. Please, 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 please address the problem of the rats and help us find creative solutions where we can all work together as San Diegans.
Thank you for that concluding comment. Going back to those participating online, started the 5-minute timer. Thank you, Original, for your patience. Please begin.
Yes, so it's really sad to hear what she's saying there, because we are feeling miserably at so many things. So it doesn't matter, what kind of, reports that you give us back on this, because, the city is failing miserably at providing what needs to be provided for people as far as shelters go. And if they are provided a shelter, they're in, really bad condition. So we can't even take care of these people. And, we look at the sale of properties and the revenue that comes from that. I mean, people are leaving at an astronomical level because of the condition of the city and because of all the things that are going on. And, we are like, it's a failure to see how many people are actually suffering and need services and aren't even able to get them. And another thing with the police and the fire department, I mean, this has been years in the coming that that you've needed them to do overtime because of the city's decision to literally get rid of half of the police force, or I mean, third of it. And I'm not sure how many fire um, people that are in the fire department. So, this is something that is the fault of the city, because when you have all of these people that you had before, you had, plenty of staff. And then when you do make a decision that is going to, cause a ripple effect like this, and that's the problem, is that they're all ripple effects of the things, the policies, the whatever you guys engage in. Then later even taking money from one project and putting it over here, you're always reallocating, and it's causing issues. And, that's not going to stop until you guys do something different. And so, the city's to blame for all of these things, and it needs to start mitigating it on a better level. I mean, the homeless people shouldn't be living in a rat-infested shelter. If you want people to be in there, we need to be more mindful.
Your time has concluded. Thank you, Blair Beekman. If you can please unmute.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman. I'll try to keep my words short today. The city of Oakland is going through some of the same budget issues as San Diego. I've been listening to the recent Oakland budget meetings, what they're going through. Boy, I just can't help but think of San Diego. And you two cities have really important, good connections with each other. They're in a bit more difficult situation than you're in, but you are trying to find ways to work out of it. And good luck in those efforts. We are trying to address police overtime. Police overtime is very glaring in this budget season, and good luck how that can take place. I don't know what can happen with that, but we're noting it, and that's important. We're noting it. I mean, it's an issue we've been trying to deal with for years now. Good luck how we work on it. And with the remainder of this budget, good luck how we are addressing. I'd heard talk of flood issues to be talked about for this item. Good luck, and good luck in our connections that we make with Oakland this time, and working to really save ourselves, the efforts we need to do. And I hope that it can be open and a decent process to explain that to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. That does conclude public comment on this item.
All right, thank you, Clerk. I will begin council's discussion with Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for the report and the efforts of the Department of Finance, as well as all of our city departments, for your collective work in gathering the relevant data that's needed in order to help compile this year-end report. As we discussed in the committee, we had a fairly tough budget cycle this fiscal year, where every dollar certainly had an impact on our ability to fund various city priorities and services. And so even a portion of that $22 million that has been identified for excess equity would have made a significant impact on our budget discussions. But ultimately, I think part of what I discussed in committee was just when you put the numbers in context, the actuals that are being presented compared to how they varied from our third quarter projections only varied by about 0.5%. Which, given all the unexpected activity that we've seen, the macroeconomic volatility, is still an impressive number at the end of the day. And I said it then, we'll repeat it. Certainly would appreciate that we are on this side of being a little bit over, as opposed to on the other side and having to figure out how to bridge a gap. So thanks for your work on making those projections and ensuring that the actuals actually fell in line. I do want to thank the mayor and the Department of Finance for working with the entire executive team to control a number of the expenditures that we saw in the last half of the fiscal year. Certainly that played a significant impact in terms of our ability to balance the budget. The report shared that expenditures were mitigated by about $18 million in the third quarter. And you've noted several of the drivers behind that already. At committee, I think we also discussed that beyond some of those mitigations, there are also some deferred expenditures that helped us with the savings that we anticipated at the end of the last fiscal year, but we would anticipate to likely still have a budgetary impact in this current fiscal year. Can you just sort of recap again sort of the savings that we anticipated there, and why it may not be as large of an excess as we're seeing?
Yeah, we estimate that between $5 to $8 million of expenditures were deferred from fiscal year 24 to 25. And this could be due to invoices that just came in later than anticipated, or just pushing out expenditures into the next year to ensure savings.
Do you anticipate that some of those will be absorbed within the approved budget that we have fiscal year, or is there going to be an anticipation that with the mid-year report and further that we'll need to have some adjustment to account for that?
In discussing with departments, most of them don't believe that their budget could absorb these, so we will probably be coming back at mid-year discussing these.
Okay, thank you. I think that's just helpful for us to get a grasp of that, even though it says $22.6 million, that there is some room that we've got to consider given some of the deferrals. In committee, we also discussed the outlook for general fund major revenues, in particular how, as you've shown in the report, both sales tax and TOT continue to be softer than anticipated. We've also discussed as a council previously how property tax tends to trend a little bit from a lagging perspective as well. And so in anticipation of the 5-year outlook discussion that we'll be having probably in about a month, do you think that we're continuing to expect that revenues will soften? And is this sort of an indicator as to how we need to approach, future revenue expectations with some caution?
Yes, we are seeing softening revenues, especially in the sales tax and transient occupancy tax revenues. For example, for sales tax, we did budget about a 4.25% growth for the current fiscal year. We're now seeing, with the help of our consultant, that growth is a little closer to 2%, just a little over 2. We're seeing the same things with TOT. It is softening. We budgeted about 5.9% growth. We are seeing less growth this current fiscal year, and that essentially decreases the baseline for a 5-year financial outlook going forward.
Thank you. I will just simply point out for the public, when you hear that, it's not concerning in the sense that we're seeing a downtrend from an economic standpoint. We're continuing to see growth in all of these components. They're maybe just not paced at the same degree of growth that we saw in the immediate years following the recovery from the pandemic. So we've certainly seen a lot of improvement for the city and some significant growth, but that growth might be just softening a little bit. The last thing I might just point out to my colleagues is that we are, as I believe that both the report and the IBA pointed out, below the targeted amount for our general fund reserves, and it's a number that I know we all recognize we need to continue monitoring because it's vital to preserving our strong credit rating. I believe you've noted that we're about $8.4 million shy of our reserve target, which is about 13.6% at this stage. And I just wanted to ask how the city might anticipate meeting that goal, especially if budgetary conditions might continue to shift.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Lee. That's a concern, especially when we're seeing that revenues are not coming in as strong as we were hoping they would. We will need to see what happens in the mid-year when we do a full comprehensive review of the entire general fund, all revenues, all expenditures, and see where we stand. Obviously, with the election just a week away, a little bit over a week away, we'll also be seeing if the sales tax measure is successful, which will be critical in order for us to continue to be able to build reserves. If it's not successful, then that'll be something that we'll probably need to revisit.
Understood. Well, thank you again for the report. Certainly a critical piece of our continued budget monitoring, and I'm looking forward to the next stage of the conversation, which is going to be our next 5-year outlook. And by then, we will certainly have a better sense of what to anticipate after the next week as well. Thank you. Concludes my comments.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Von Wilper.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation and the excellent work on our budgets. We in San Diego are not alone in suffering from a failing sales tax growth and TOT growth. Tourism is actually down around the country right now in major tourist areas. People aren't purchasing things like they were. The national election, I think, is hanging over everybody right now. So I've talked to other tourism district folks who say in Florida, their tourism's down, New Orleans, the tourism's down. So it's not just here. Hopefully that will resolve soon, and we can expect a good year next year. I wanted to ask a couple questions, please, about the excess equity. The 105 million, building on our budget chair's question about our reserve policy. So if we're 8.4 million below our target reserves, why didn't we just plug in money from excess equity to make sure we're meeting our reserve target?
Are you asking why didn't we take request action from council to transfer that excess equity to? Well, we want to see what happens on next Tuesday. That those funds could be critical for us to plug in any gaps that we see during the mid-year process. However, if the sales tax administrator is successful and we have additional revenue, then that's definitely something we would consider. Other factor is that we are seeing revenue soften when we're comparing actuals to our projections on a monthly basis. We're already below about $10 million on just in the major revenues alone. We're also seeing some overages in overtime, which we're monitoring. So that 21 million could potentially be consumed by either softer revenue or increased expenditures as well.
Okay. Got it. And then in general, the 105 million in excess equity, so 84 million was already used for FY25's budget. How did the Department of Finance determine how to allocate that $84 million?
It's basically just a general resource like any major revenue. So it basically comes in to cover any shortfall for the entirety of the $2.2 billion general fund budget. It's not allocated specifically to any particular priority.
Okay, then why, if we have the shortfall is so large, why not allocate the entire 120 million?
Well, we didn't know at the time the budget was prepared that we would have this excess $21 million. Councilmember, if I could add, when you were adopting the budget, the $80 million or so that he's talking about in existing excess equities, what we knew we would have going into FY25, that was recognized as a one-time resource for the mayor to propose the use of and for council to actually adopt the use of when you were adopting the budget. So you did that with that $85 million. The remaining 20 million that's being talked about now is money that we didn't know that we had in April and in May and in June. And that's coming as a result of slight changes in revenues and slight underages in our expenditures. So that's really what we've seen over the last 3 months.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, that was my confusion, was I thought this was a new action DUF had done. I didn't realize it was because a million fires have happened between when we passed the budget in June and now. So thank you, Charles, for that clarification. So it's 20 million of new revenue. We've already voted on programming the 84 million. Well, one of my questions is going to be, since we have excess equity, do we still have to raid the fire department's EMS fund, which was proposed in the FY25 budget? They could use that fund to train more paramedics, so we actually don't have a paramedic shortage. We have people in-house. I would prefer for that to stay in the fire department because we're looking at the entire alliance model and how we deploy EMS. So could this new excess equity change that calculation?
I think we need to look at the entire general fund, and that won't happen until we complete our mid-year projections. When we look at all revenues and all expenditures, there might be savings in our departments, there might be overages, so we need to see where we stand, how the economy is doing, again, the results of the election, but just conceptually, yes, that those dollars could be allocated towards providing relief to the EMS fund.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to, this whole discussion will be moot if the sales tax passes. But, the EMS fund is actually, it's not a new allocation that I'd be arguing for. It's just simply arguing not to take that money away. And so I'm not trying to say, oh, you should allocate this over here. What I'm saying is don't raid that fund. Leave it where it is. And if we do priority in that, if we have priority in not raiding funds that already have money in it, if we have excess equity versus putting the excess equity in new programs and then raiding the funds that we said we're going to fund in the first place. So, but again, that's all going to be moot if the sales tax passes. So I'm happy to put a pin in that. And then if the sales tax doesn't pass, we're going to have a lot more hard conversations than just the EMS fund. I would like to use additional money to fund our police officers, our firefighters, repave our roads, make sure that we don't have bursting storm drains. We have residents suffering Carl Mountain Ranch. We had a storm drain collapse in a business district a few months ago and took out their whole parking lot. So I would like to use the excess funding for public safety and infrastructure. And so that's why I'm so guarded about the EMS fund, but I'm happy to talk about that later. Thank you so much for this. Charles, thank you for the good clarification, reminding me what I was trying to ask for Department of Finance. I appreciate this team and we'll keep our fingers crossed. So thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councilmember Von Wilpert. Council President Pro Tem LaCava.
Thank you, Council President. A couple of just quick comments. Appreciate the comments and questions of my colleagues. But thank you, Department of Finance, for your good work, the way you track these numbers and the way your forecasts come in very close to actuals, and trying to figure out how we balance everything. Your work is very, very much appreciated. And thank you, Charles, you and your IBA team for your analysis. You look at it with a slightly different lens, and I think between the two of us, it keeps the council very well informed. I think the only question I have in terms of what you're actually presenting today, if you could kind of remind us, one of the unexpected expenditures was obviously the January 26th storm, and the quick movement we did in terms of trying to deal with the tragic events, and be a little bit proactive. How much we expended, how much we think we might get reimbursed by FEMA, and what kind of timeline we think. I mean, I know these are all projections.
Yeah, the total expenditures for fiscal year 24 were about 16.5 million. We do know that the Office of Emergency Services is compiling a list of all those expenditures, and we'll be submitting them for reimbursement, but that takes significant years before we'll see any of that.
And I imagine that FEMA takes years to review, so it may be not even this decade that we might actually see, if any. I'll close by, I know the overtime in public safety is always a question. I've been very supportive of public safety. If we have the ability to fill the ranks, I know we would. I know it is a national problem in terms of filling those ranks. Having said that, I appreciate the input from the IBA's office and others to try to make sure that that overtime is very strategic in how it's done, to minimize the financial impact on the general fund. But public safety is always difficult to predict, and I want those firefighters, lifeguards, police out there when the need is, when the public needs them. So I will continue to be supportive of that. But again, thank you everyone for the report today. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Council President Pro Tem. All right, I believe that brings us to the end of this discussion. No motion required here as it's an informational item. That brings us to item 201. Clerk, if you'd like to introduce that item, please.
Thank you, Council President. Item 201 is the fiscal year 2026 City Council budget priorities. This item is not subject to the mayor's veto. If you'd like to speak on this item, please be sure to submit your speaker slip to the high lectern if you are here in chambers. And if you are participating remotely, please be sure to press *9 or the raise your hand icon. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. All right. We've got our presenters getting ready, and if you'd like to introduce yourself for the record and let us know how much time you'd like for this presentation.
Great. Thank you, Council President. I'll get us kicked off, and I also have Lisa Byrne and Amy Lee in my office to join us. We'll need about 15, 60 minutes or so for the presentation. So thank you for the introductions. This item really does kick off the FY26 budget development process. It is the adoption of Council's initial budget priorities for next year's budget. Lisa and Amy will be covering the bulk of this item, but I did want to make a few introductory comments as well. First, as Lisa will discuss, this is the first time that Council's initial budget priorities will reflect the new process for identifying proposed uses of the 1% Council discretionary portion of TOT, or hotel tax revenue. This is consistent with an updated policy that was approved last year that was spearheaded by Council members Campillo and Moreno. And this process is intended to give Council the opportunity to indicate what item or items it would like to see a portion of hotel tax revenue go to in the upcoming budget. Consistent with that policy, when the proposed budget is released in April, we will evaluate it to see if Council's requests or priorities here were met. Second, as Amy will discuss, Council's priorities included both operating priorities and infrastructure priorities. While much of the discussion and the coverage of these priorities so far has been on the operating side, there were significant and high priorities that were expressed by Council members on the infrastructure side. These include unanimous prioritization among Council members for making improvements and repairs to city streets, stormwater, traffic and pedestrian safety infrastructure, sidewalks, and parks facilities. It is clear that Council has a significant prioritization of infrastructure throughout the city in its initial budget priorities. Finally, it's important to note that this is only Council's first step in the FY26 budget process. You will have an opportunity to update these priorities early next year, and then Council will ultimately have the authority to adopt or revise any budget that is proposed to it when it gets to that process in April through June. With that, I'll turn this presentation over to Lisa.
Thank you, Charles. I'll begin by reviewing the Budget Priorities Resolution process. The Budget Priorities Resolution is the first step that Council takes in providing input for the upcoming annual budget. This resolution is initially developed and approved in September and October. For fiscal year 26, Council members submitted their budget priorities memoranda to the IBA on this September 25th. Our office reviewed those memos and summarized priorities receiving majority support in IBA Report 24-30. Also included in Report 24-30 is the second component of the priorities resolution that Charles mentioned, the recommended 1-cent TOT allocation for fiscal year 26. Amendments made in December 2023 to the Council Policy on Transient Occupancy Tax, or TOT, require that Council provide a recommendation to the Mayor regarding the use of 1 cent of the city's 10.5 cents TOT, translated to a percentage that equals 9.52% of total TOT revenue. The Council Policy's goal is that 9.52% of TOT revenue, or 1 cent, be used to support Penny for the Arts. The steps in the process for the Council's 1 cent TOT recommendation start with a recommendation from the Economic Development and Intergovernmental Relations Committee to the Budget Committee, and subsequent consideration by Council of the Budget Committee's recommendation. The ED&IR Committee's October 2nd recommendation was forwarded by the Budget Committee to Council. That recommendation is to allocate the full 1 cent TOT for arts, culture, and community festivals, which is estimated to be $32.4 million, an increase of $16.3 million over the fiscal year 25 budget allocation. Today, Council will review and discuss IBA Report 2430, which, as I mentioned, includes the majority-supported priorities and 1 cent TOT recommendation. There is also a brief discussion on budget resources and mitigations. Additionally, Report 2430 includes a section on priorities supported by 4 Council members, but also mentions that those priorities will not be part of the Budget Priorities Resolution unless Council designates them as such. To that point, on October 16th, the Budget Committee recommended that Council accept Report 2430 with one modification to include those priorities supported by 4 Council members in the Budget Priorities Resolution. Council may make further changes to the budget priorities or the 1 cent TOT recommendation in its action today. Our office will update our report to reflect the Council's action. Once Council approves the Budget Priorities Resolution, it will be submitted to the Mayor for consideration in developing the fiscal year 26 proposed budget. Additionally, as was the case for the past 2 fiscal years, there will be an opportunity for Council to update the Budget Priorities Resolution, as Charles mentioned, in February. A related call memo will be issued mid-December for Council members to update their budget priorities memoranda. Note the Budget Committee's October 16th motion requested our office provide updated revenue projections to be included in that call memo. We would note there is potential for significant changes to the initial priorities resolution after considering the results of Measure E, the November sales tax measure. If Measure E fails, Council may wish to consider refocusing its priorities resolution on existing city activities that are critical to maintain rather than identifying new expenditures. Moving to majority-supported priorities. There was broad overlap in a number of areas as shown in this slide. We group majority priorities into 2 main categories. First, operating budget priorities on the left table, which includes priorities related to homelessness and housing, public safety, and several other priority categories. Second, infrastructure budget priorities on the right table, such as transportation and mobility safety, sidewalks, and facilities. Amy will cover specific priorities included in these categories shortly. Although no specific resource and budget mitigation priorities received majority support at this time, our report highlights several resources mentioned in Council members' memos, including grants, bond financing, excess equity, trash fee implementation, and a potential sales tax revenue increase should Measure E pass in the November election. The city is in the early stages of the fiscal year 26 budget process, and there will be more in-depth discussions about revenues and resources as the budget process evolves. Now I'll turn the presentation to Amy Lee, who will cover the majority supported priorities.
Um, Sorry about that. So thank you, Lisa. On the expenditure side, we focus first on fiscal year 2026 infrastructure-related budget priorities funded in either the capital budget or the operating budget. Of note, one council member's memorandum included support for some items that is conditional on the identification of additional resources. Budget priorities that included conditional support are indicated by an asterisk throughout our presentation. Starting with transportation and mobility safety, which was supported by all council members. All 9 council members supported traffic calming measures to reduce the speed of traffic, various pedestrian and bicycle safety measures, and the need to modify or add traffic signals to improve safety and traffic flow. 8 council members supported the need to repair, replace, and install new street lights. 6 council members prioritized creating separated, protected bike lanes. Investments in street maintenance and repaving received unanimous support from council. Finally, sidewalk installation and repair also received unanimous support. All 9 council members supported additional funding for stormwater capital projects, with a majority supporting increased funding for stormwater channel maintenance activities. A majority of council members raised the need for improvements to existing facilities. These include park and recreation improvements, which were supported by all council members, maintenance and capital improvements for police headquarters and other police facilities, which were supported by 8 council members, lifeguard towers and facilities, which were supported by 9 council members, with a particular focus on North Pacific Beach Lifeguard Tower, which had support from 7 council members, and Ocean Beach Lifeguard Tower, which had support from 6 council members. Fire rescue facilities, including funding existing or new fire stations, which were supported by 5 council members, and existing library facilities, which were supported by 7 council members. 7 council members prioritized capital projects to ensure compliance with Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, as well as funding the current backlog of ADA transition and complaint projects. We next turn back to the operating budget priorities that received majority support. Again, any conditional mentions are as shown on this slide with an asterisk next to the count. Starting first with homelessness and housing. There were 8 budget priorities that received majority support. All 9 council members supported a variety of homelessness and housing related items, reflecting that homelessness and housing remain a high priority. All 9 council members prioritized funding for the Housing Instability Prevention Program, which provides rental assistance to low-income households, the Eviction Prevention Program, which offers education and legal services for low-income renters facing eviction, and the preservation and creation of affordable housing, with 8 council members specifically requesting the creation of a naturally occurring affordable housing preservation fund. 7 council members supported homelessness outreach, especially the multidisciplinary outreach team, which had 6 mentions, and expanding shelter capacity through various options, such as safe parking and safe sleeping for vulnerable populations, including seniors. The remaining majority supported items from homelessness and housing were mentioned by 5 council members. This includes funding for the expansion of the LGBTQ plus youth shelter, the Fostering Futures program, which provides monthly financial subsidies and wraparound services for former foster youth, and the tenant termination notice registry, which would help implement the residential tenant protection ordinance approved by council in April 2023. Next, all 9 council members expressed support for various environmental and climate action priorities. In particular, 8 council members expressed support for the Urban Forestry Program and additional funding to implement various actions called for in the Climate Action Plan. 5 council members called for continued funding of the Mobility Master Plan, including funding for mobility projects identified in that plan, and fully funding the Climate Equity Fund, which was not fully funded in the fiscal year 2025 proposed budget. Moving next to public safety. 8 council members requested additional staffing for the lifeguard division, including 1 marine safety captain and 3 marine safety lieutenants. 7 council members supported continued funding for the No Shots Fired Youth Intervention Program, which provides comprehensive outreach and wraparound services to prevent youth violence or gun violence. 5 council members supported police recruitment and retention efforts, as well as funding for the Resources Access Program, or RAP, which takes a coordinated approach to high utilizers of emergency services. So I think with that, sorry. So other operating budget priorities are shown on this slide. This includes neighborhood services, which there was unanimous support for library funding. Specifically, 6 council members requested funding for library materials and maintenance. 7 council members supported continued funding of weed abatement in the public right-of-way. 5 council members supported various resources related to brush management in the city's canyons and open space areas. For arts and culture, all 9 council members supported increasing overall funding for arts and culture. 5 council members supported fully funding the Penny for the Arts goal of 9.52% of citywide TOT, which would require an additional $16.3 million beyond fiscal year 2025 budgeted levels. This funding level aligns with the recommendation from the ED&IR and Budget Committee, which Lisa mentioned earlier. The remaining 4 council members supported incremental increases, with 2 council members supporting at least 6.5% of citywide TOT, or an additional $6 million beyond currently budgeted. For the remaining operating budget priorities, 5 council members supported funding for the city clerk for record management, including additional staff and funding, and city recruitment and retention efforts. Next, I will hand it back to Lisa to cover the remaining slides.
Thanks, Amy. This slide shows the priorities that were supported by 4 council members. As I mentioned earlier, the Budget Committee recommended council include these priorities in the fiscal year 26 budget priorities resolution. On the left are the operating priorities. These include project planning and design work to redevelop the old Central Library, specifically to provide new affordable housing, on-site homelessness navigation, and shelter services and placements. Second is funding for police vehicles. Next, parks programming, including for the Come Play Outside, Parks After Dark, and senior programs. A new pilot youth enrichment program offering no-cost after-school programs for elementary-age children to pre-high school teenagers. Establishing a global sports event fund to help stage and market sports events. Support for this priority included 1 conditional mention as noted by the asterisks. Funding and staff support for the Office of Labor Standards and Enforcement. And last, under operating priorities, is maintenance or expansion of the city's digital equity program, San Diego Access for All. On the infrastructure side is funding for various unimproved streets or alleys. To wrap up, we request that council consider the components of the Budget Committee's recommendation, including majority supported priorities, the recommended 1 cent TOT allocation, and priorities supported by 4 council members. The council may make further modifications to the Budget Committee's recommendation. In doing so, the council should consider balancing the addition of priorities with the recognition that with funding constraints, the addition of more priorities may diminish the impact of individual priorities of high importance. We ask the council to adopt the fiscal year 26 budget priorities resolution by accepting IBA report 2430 as modified by the Budget Committee with any desired further changes. The second action is to direct our office to deliver a modified report to the mayor for consideration in developing the fiscal year 26 proposed budget. IBA report 2430 will be revised to reflect the budget priorities resolution adopted by council and will include council members' memos. And this concludes our presentation. We're here for any questions.
Thank you so much. All right, let's hear public comment.
Thank you, Council President. We do have several speakers here in council chamber as well as in the Zoom, so we will be having 1 minute per person. If we can please have the following individuals please come forward to the yellow reserved seats at the front of the room. Christine Martinez, Bob Lehman, Jacinta Wong, Kim Phillips P., Kara Camden, Abe Hughes, and Jim Lydon, my apologies. Christine, you can come up to the microphone. You'll have 1 minute. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Council, for having us here today. I appreciate the discussion and all the hard work and thought that you put forward in your budget and the budget priority. We are really excited to have unanimous support from you all for arts and culture funding. We understand that we don't have all the information and the details that we need just yet, but we appreciate your careful consideration of this. Arts and culture is essential. We're an essential core service. I think some people like to think of us as a nice to have, not a need to have. And we've been saying for so many years as we come in front here, and we've heard your supportive comments, that arts and culture is an essential core service. We have plenty of employment in the city. We get tourists here. We build the character of who San Diego is, and funding is important to do that. And we feel it's priority and it's time to get to that full penny. And we appreciate you. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for that concluding comment. Bob Lehman?
Good afternoon, Council President Elo Rivera, and members of City Council. I'm Bob Lehman, Executive Director of the San Diego Museum Council. We represent a coalition of 80 museums and cultural institutions with programs in all nine council districts. I'm here to thank you on behalf of the tens of thousands of museums, employees, and volunteers. Thank you for unanimously including arts and culture funding in your budget priorities. As the current recipient of city funding, I can tell you personally that the financial support makes a significant impact on us, and especially for our smaller museums. We are fortunate to be a city of world-class museums and a vibrant arts community that creates jobs, generates tax revenue, and drives tourism industry. We're an excellent investment with an even better return. We need increased city funding to realize our full potential. However, today's fiscal year city 24 budget in real dollars reduces arts and culture funding levels to 15 years ago. According to the Americans for the Arts report last year, San Diego's nonprofit arts generated nearly $1.2 billion. Thanks for protecting
Thank you
our.
for that concluding comment. Jacinta Wong?
Thank you, council members, for your time. My name is Jacinta Wong. I'm the Executive Director for the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum, newly representing District 7 and the museum's home in District 3. At the SDCHM, we connect San Diegans and visitors to our region to the city's diverse heritage, offering ethnic studies and DEI programming that bring the Asian Pacific Historic District and its stories to life to thousands each year. The programs we offer are vital in fostering pride, inclusion, and understanding across all our communities. Our museum, like many arts and cultural organizations in San Diego, serve as a core city asset. The contributions of arts and culture are multifaceted. They create jobs, provide essential education, and cultivate a sense of community, identity, and pride. But none of this is possible without increased support from the city. Current funding levels limit our reach. We thank you for your unanimous support in including arts and culture funding in your budget priorities. Your commitment affirms the essential role that arts and culture play in shaping San Diego's vibrant communities.
Thank you for that concluding comment. Kim Phillips P.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Kim Phillips P. I'm a local artist, face painter. I have a gallery in D8. And I'm also with Arts and Culture SD. As a recipient of the Impact and Far South Border North Grant, I'm thankful for your support. I'd like to say that arts and culture is a core city service that creates jobs, education opportunities, and community identity, but not without your support. We're America's finest city, so let's show it by setting up a foundation for our arts community. In a review in 2023 that covered aspects of supply and demand public support for arts and culture, San Diego did not rank in the top 20 list of cities supporting the arts, but we have it within us. We can do it to make the change. So thank you for your continued support, and we look forward to more. Thank you.
Thank you. Kara Camden?
Hi, my name is Cara Camden, and I live in D9. I work with Arts and Culture San Diego, and I'm a community advocate for parks and libraries. I have 2 school-age kids, and I'd like to thank you all for unanimously including arts and culture funding in your budget priorities. In our neighborhood, we have a nonprofit arts organization named Transcend Dance that provides dance instruction, after-school care, food, and counseling for kids from families of various income levels and diverse backgrounds. They're able to subsidize the cost of the program for the large majority of participants, thanks in part to funding from the city. In addition to dancing and all the health benefits that brings, the kids make strong bonds, practice leadership, and have access to mental health services. Please keep our city's dynamic arts organizations like Transcendence in mind as you continue to look at your budget priorities. Not only do the arts heal and provide opportunity, they create jobs and strengthen our creative economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Abe Hughes?
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Abe Hughes. I'm a Commissioner for Arts and Culture representing District 1. And I'd just like to thank you for making arts and culture a priority in this budget, getting us to 4.5% from what I understand. However, to meet the promise of Penny for the Arts, we definitely would need to be in the 9.5% range and hope to work with you to get us there. I relocated from Chicago and just came back from a trip in Chicago where I was highly involved in arts and culture there. And Mayor Daley had the right idea, beautify the city and make arts and culture a priority. That transformed the city from an old steelmaking economy to one that really celebrates the arts. My daughter ran the marathon there. There were 50,000 runners. The impact was over 100,000 people there, and many of them enjoyed Millennium Park and also all of the arts and culture venues. In conclusion, I want to say money will make it happen to make us a great art city. It really improves our economy as well as culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jim. And you have time stated to by Alan Tulloch. If you can please raise your hand, Alan. Thank you. And Bradley Burt. Thank you. You'll have 3 minutes.
I don't expect to take that. My name is Jim Lyden. I'm a resident of the Marina District, specifically live at the Horizons property. I'm here to speak about the safety concerns at the intersection of First and Market Street. It's my understanding that there's some effort to make some improvements there, including the installation of a left turn signal for those vehicles that are headed eastbound on Market Street. As a resident, I have the opportunity to look down on that intersection. I'm often alerted to traffic collisions that occur at that intersection on a routine basis. And as such, we're well aware of the significance there. In addition to the traffic light, there are other safety concerns with this intersection. Recently, that intersection upgrade where the walk signal was advanced to come on prior to the change of the red light. However, unlike the intersection at 4th and Market, where there's the installation of a bright red, no right turn on red light that comes on when that occurs, we do not have that at our intersection. We have pedestrians who begin to walk on the red light and cars are starting to make the right-hand turn. It's only a matter of time. Although I'm not a traffic reconstruction expert, I spent my entire career responding to emergency incidents, including traffic collisions. I observe those collisions for points of impact, mechanism of injury, those types of things. Using this experience, I've looked at many of the incidents that have occurred in the intersection. It's not just a left turn signal issue. All the stuff I've talked about so far is one of the 5 E's of risk reduction. The other is enforcement. Many of the incidents are occurring because of vehicles that are northbound on First Avenue at a high rate of speed to get through the red light and catching somebody making the right turn from Market Street onto First. So it's not just that left turn that needs to be addressed. We need to address the other E, which is enforcement. We have numerous daily occurrences of vehicles going the wrong way on the one-way streets, making left-hand turns from the far right-hand lane on front onto Island because Island to the right is closed on the weekends for the Children's Museum. All of this needs to be addressed through the enforcement aspect of risk reduction. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. If I can have the following individuals please come up, and Sandy Muskowski, if you can please come up to the microphone, and the following to the yellow reserve seats: Stephen Russell, Willie James Bradley, Amanda Francis, Bruce Karen, Miriam Bettis, and Luke McQuaid. You'll have 1 minute. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. Thank you again. I want to thank you for prioritizing homelessness in the FY26 budget because we know that needs to be a top priority. We need to get really creative about our solutions, including how we address shelters and try to avoid mass congregate shelters. We also need to get creative in order to reduce the criminalization of homelessness and increase our staff staffing shortages that we're currently experiencing right now in our homelessness service providers. Consider solutions like creating incentive programs for professionals to go into social work, to increase wages for our social workers so that we can recruit and retain high-quality social workers, because that is the first way to work with our homeless populations. Also, the arts are another solution to homelessness. I'm a member of Voices of Our City Choir, and we continue to collaborate and work together to solve homelessness. So thank you for continuing to create creative solutions on homelessness. Thank you again.
Thank you, Stephen Russell, and you have time ceded to you by Dennis Larson or Denise Larson. Can you please raise your hand? Thank you. You'll have 2 minutes to proceed.
Great. Good afternoon, Honorable Council President and Council members. My name is Stephen Russell, President and CEO of the San Diego Housing Federation. Our federation houses over 35,000 households in the county of San Diego, but there's a need for 100,000 more affordable households. It's a critical need. But I'm here to thank you, all of you, because you have unanimously identified housing and homelessness as among your top priorities. I want to thank you for acknowledging that homelessness is a housing problem that can best be addressed through what we call the 4 Ps, which include prevention of homelessness through a variety of means, the protection of renters through adequate renter protections, legal services, and resources sometimes to avoid eviction. Preservation of existing affordable housing. We certainly support the San Diego Housing Federation's Housing Commission's efforts to create a preservation fund. But we also need dollars for the production of new affordable housing. All of these measures are needed during a time when increasing numbers of families and individuals are becoming homeless. And the challenge in the budget underscores the importance of creating a local, dedicated source of revenue for housing so we don't go year to year. Every year, it's going to be a priority for at least the next 20 years, even if we put significant resources toward this. We need to be able to leverage local dollars with state, federal, and notably public employers and large private employers as well. There's been some talk about the necessity of Measure E passing in order for us to meet the very critical needs of our community. We should not only say yes on Prop 5, we should also pay attention to Measure E, but also to Prop 5, which would make it easier to create the resources we need locally. So both Measure E and Prop 5 are critical to our success. Please, hopefully the resources come and that I would urge you to remember these priorities as we have future discussions. Thank you for the support and we look forward to next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you. Willie James Bradley.
Good evening, council members. My name is Willie Bradley, a member of the Hill Network. I want to applaud your efforts in prioritizing the critical issues of affordable housing and homelessness. Prevention, protection, preservation, and production of affordable housing need to be protected in order to keep San Diegans off the street. By investing in rental assistance, tenant education, and legal services, affordable housing preservation, and new housing development, you are taking significant steps towards creating a more compassionate community. The fear of eviction, the struggle to make ends meet, and the consistent uncertainty of finding a safe and affordable place to call home are burdens that no one should have to bear. Our community, our commitment to addressing these issues offers hope for a brighter future. Not only for those currently experiencing homelessness.
Thank you for that concluding comment. I'm sorry, your time has concluded.
All right, thank you. I appreciate you.
If you have any written comments, you can definitely give it to my staff and they can hand them out. Amanda Francis.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Amanda Francis. I'm the General Manager of Renaissance Owners Association. I am here today requesting that the council include installation of a protected left turn signal at the intersection of First Avenue and Market as a budget priority. This intersection is centrally located near major downtown attractions such as the Convention Center, Petco Park, and Gaslamp, which attracts high volumes of pedestrian and vehicular traffic. As you heard earlier, drivers traveling in this area must wait for the cars traveling west on Market Street to pass while also waiting for pedestrians in the crosswalk on First Avenue Typically, by the time the cars on Market Street clear traveling west, the light is turning yellow or red, so drivers are quickly accelerating to get out of the intersection. But that is also when pedestrians are rushing to cross the street before the crosswalk turns red also. You can imagine how scary this is for drivers and pedestrians who regularly navigate this intersection. Thank you for your time.
Bruce Karen? Bruce? Carron? No? Miriam Perez?
Hello, good afternoon, council members. My name is Miriam Perez. I'm a member of the HEAL and RUN network as well. And as a young child, I experienced the harsh reality of homelessness alongside my family. We struggle to find stable housing, and that's one of the main reasons I advocate for housing and also your commitment to prioritizing housing and homelessness prevention efforts, such as rental assistance and tenant protections, is a lifeline for countless families like mine. We applaud your recognition that homelessness is fundamentally a housing crisis by prioritizing the following strategies: preservation of existing affordable housing. Safeguarding our existing stock of affordable housing is essential to maintaining stable and inclusive communities. Production of new affordable housing, investing in the development of new affordable housing units is crucial to meeting the growing demand and ensuring that everyone has a safe and affordable place to call.
Thank you for that concluding comment. Luke McQuaid?
Hi, good afternoon. Excuse me. My name is Luke McQuaid. I'm a downtown resident and also president of the HOA condo where I live. Also speaking in support of putting in a left turn signal at the corner of First and Market. It's 5 blocks due south of here. You all have probably seen it before. It's right there at the corner of the Ralphs. As some other people said, constantly accidents there. I can hear it out the window. We see people crashing into planters, into trees, pedestrians running across, near misses, just a very dangerous area. It's a, highly developed area. Lots of people live there, lots of traffic, lots of pedestrians. So it would go a long way to fund that project specifically. And, thank you all very much for I know it's difficult with, homelessness, infrastructure, lots of big issues, but this is a small one that would make a lot of difference to the downtown Marina District people there. Thank you.
Thank you. The Jacob Shore and Brad Stedman had submitted speaker slips in favor, but did not wish to speak. We'll go to those participating remotely, starting the 5-minute timer here in council chambers. We currently have 5 speakers with their hands raised, starting with Jesse Ramirez. If you can please unmute.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Jesse Ramirez, and I am the Senior Program Manager for the Transportation and Planning Department at City Heights CDC. I'm here to speak supporting 3 different items. The first one is the University Avenue Impact Fund. This is a budget item requested by City Heights CDC to help business mitigate the impact from the construction delays on University Avenue that has devastated the small business community. The second item is the Rosa Parks Hybrid Beacon. City Heights CDC has worked with parents to identify these as a need to make it easier for our students to walk to school. The last item is the $3.3 million requested by the San Diego Housing Commission to create the Naturally Occurring Affordable Housing Preservation Fund. Housing is a big need in our area, and this will allow for a region to be in a position to bring in state funding to continue to address this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have the original. If you can please unmute. The original, I cannot unmute for you.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Yes, so, it's just interesting to hear you guys talk about priorities, because it doesn't matter how many priorities you have, we're still lacking in what is needed to be provided to the community. And you promise the Penny for Arts people a certain amount of money that's supposed to go to fund their stuff. You didn't promise them money outside of that. And what you're doing is you're actually taking funds that are coming from somewhere else that potentially could be used for something else and giving it to them. So, it's sad to see that we have people suffering on the streets, and it doesn't matter even if you provide a shelter, you don't keep up with the shelter to make sure that what you're providing is actually conducive to live in. None of you guys would live in a rat infested shelter, but you're having people do that. And, so if we had priorities that were actually going to be met, then that, this would look hopeful. But unfortunately, we can't even meet the priorities that we have now. So I don't see how you're going to meet them in the future.
Thank you. Next, we have Pamela Stambaugh, if you can please unmute. Stambaugh.
Thank you. Yes. So I'm here supporting the Market Street and First Avenue stoplight as well, with the experience that I'm not within sight, but I'm within sound of that intersection. And too many nights I'm awakened with a crash. And one in particular that I recall vividly is a party wagon of people laughing and smiling and, making happy sounds. And then those turn to screams and then silence. So although, yes, there is a direct benefit to those of us that live in the Renaissance and in the neighborhood, but that benefit extends to people who have been hurt or even killed at that intersection. It is a primary in and out for the convention center and all of the other things that were mentioned before. So I'm a resident, and that's my request, is that you prioritize safety.
Thank you. Next is Karina Contreras, if you can please unmute.
Thank you so much. My name is Karina Contreras. I'm speaking in my capacity as Transportation Policy Advocate for Climate Action Campaign. First, I just want to thank the council for their commitment to street level safety and the mobility master plan. It's critical that these 11 focus areas in the mobility master plan have dedicated funding, so that way the improvements can actually be made to ensure that folks can get to where they need to go in a safe manner. Also, it is critically important that the Climate Equity Fund is fully funded and expanded. And lastly, we can't forget that there's a lot of work to do on stormwater infrastructure and maintenance, and $100 million annually is a good start to go ahead and move forward with the maintenance and infrastructure improvements needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Blair Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman. For myself, what's important, I'm interested in how we can talk about budget issues that don't necessarily need to talk about money. We're having tough budget times. I'm thinking with my work with tech accountability, things like the trust ordinance, that takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of legal effort to define the future of the trust ordinance. But yet the trust ordinance was created out of just a basic simplicity of what is better community participation, what is accountability, what is transparency. If we work towards openness and we work towards these good goals, that doesn't need money. And I hope we can do that for a lot of our city projects coming up. What can we do that we give our love, our heart, and our feelings to, and our shared values and beliefs and trust? That we could do these things without money. Good luck how we can work towards those goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Judy Strang, and the 5-minute timer did conclude here in council chambers. We have 3 speakers left in the queue and no additional speakers will be taken. Judy Strang, if you can please unmute. I can unmute for you. There you go. We do not hear you here in council chambers, but I do see that you are unmuted. I'm not sure if the device that you're speaking into may be muted. We will have to move on if you cannot fix your technical issues. Judy Strang. My apologies. You can definitely still email in your comments to cityclerk@sandiego.gov, and we'll be sure to distribute those. Jesse Ramirez, if you can please unmute. Jesse Ramirez, I cannot unmute for you. There you go.
I believe I already spoke earlier, so I
Oh,
see
my
my time.
apologies for not lowering your hand. Thank you. Manny Rodriguez, you're our final speaker. Manny Rodriguez, I have unmute. There you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Hi, thank you, City Clerk. My name is Manny. I'm speaking today as my capacity as a program manager for City Heights Community Development, here to speak in support of the University Avenue Business Impact Fund. I've been working with the small businesses on the ground for many months now to try to help them overcome many of the challenges that have been faced by the construction. Ultimately, the result will be good. The construction will be great once it's over, but it has been incredibly painful for many of the businesses, and the University Avenue Business Impact Fund will help the corridor recover. I'm also here to show my support for the Rosa Parks flashing beacons. I've been working with volunteer moms there in Rosa Parks to advocate for improved traffic safety measures. And while we got some small things in, we really need some of the more notable investments. And I also want to show my support for the Housing Commission's Affordable Housing Preservation Fund. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. That does include public comment on item 201.
All right, thank you, Clerk. Let's begin council's discussion of this item with Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Charles, Lisa, Amy, to the rest of the Office of the Independent Budget Analyst. As always, I want to take the opportunity to thank the IBA's office for their thorough efforts to analyze all of our different council priorities and to compile them into this comprehensive report that both we and the public can ultimately understand. As a reminder, I think to everyone here, the budget process has adapted over the years with an additional budget priorities memo now issued from all of our offices in September. Previously, this process did not start until January of the following year. And I think as the IBA's office has noted, this is really just the first step in what is our year-long effort to develop the next fiscal year budget. And I think as my colleagues would attest, each of us work pretty hard to try to capture a snapshot of what we believe are the relevant priorities of our constituents, as well as the city as a whole, ranging from what feels like smaller quality of life issues, including down to a particular intersection or a series of streets, to identifying long-term initiatives and major infrastructure projects that may take years to meet. We're all going to be working to refine these priorities in the months ahead, hopefully to align with the anticipated revenues that we see, as well as alongside the 5-year outlook that we're going to be considering in the near future. When I'm looking at the IBA's report, I think it's important to point out that the City Council strongly supports making infrastructure one of our top spending priorities. When you look through the report, you can see clearly identified from our streets, streetlights, and sidewalks, to stormwater infrastructure that's needed, to key city facilities, from parks and libraries to public safety. Each of us have mapped out what we believe are numerous infrastructure needs throughout our districts in order to really meet a lot of that quality of life that we anticipate our residents calling for. And as we're going to see later in the State of the CIP discussion, we have begun to make progress on ramping up on some of these efforts, starting even with our streets. Just as an example, this year's goal was to repair 310 miles of roadway, and so far 327.3 miles of street pavement repairs have been completed. That's 5% more than the established fiscal year 2024 street pavement repair goal, 72% more than what was repaired in fiscal year 2023. However, even with those improvements, we have to continue to maintain our collective focus on repairing our streets. And to do that, we've got to secure and then to allocate the necessary funding in order to accomplish that. I think we've discussed a couple of times now how the possibility of new revenue might be available if Measure E certainly passes. And I think my focus, and I believe the focus of our colleagues here as well, will be to ensure that the full funding of those very infrastructure needs that we've identified will be accomplished using the very specific plans that this council has also previously discussed. For example, this council's reviewed the pavement management plan for streets, where a roadmap for efforts over the next decade, along with the resources that will be necessary to accomplish those efforts, that roadmap is already in front of us. San Diegoans have made it fairly clear that they want this council to focus on improving our roads, our stormwater infrastructure, our parks and libraries, much more. These are all core city services that we have to continue to prioritize, and I found continue to be highlighted in the priority memos that we've submitted. I will also be closely monitoring the city's continued investments in housing and shelter programs. Again, one of the core highlights in the report. And these programs, especially the ones that I think this council has identified fairly unanimous support for, include the Housing Instability Prevention Program, the Eviction Prevention Program, efforts to preserve and create affordable housing, continued efforts to expand homelessness outreach, as well as to expand shelter capacity. Each of these items are vital to achieving our collective goal of keeping more San Diegans securely housed. And of course, as a council, there are numerous other initiatives that we continue to want to see funding increases for, including arts and culture. And thank you to the community on that front for continuing to come out and advocate. I think as we've mentioned both at Budget Committee and in other discussions, there are a number of external factors that may impact the amount of revenue that we will have as we start the FY26 budget development process. And so even with the possibility of additional revenue, we're going to need to make choices on how we choose to prioritize short-term goals, of which we've identified, but also which long-term goals do we anticipate making some progress towards. And then what's the balance that we ultimately choose to use as a council and as a city when it comes to utilizing cash resources that we have available, as well as our willingness to take on both short-term and long-term debt in order to, again, accomplish some of these long-term infrastructure initiatives. This list of priorities that we've identified in today's resolution is just a framework for the mayor to consider as he develops the fiscal year 2026 budget. And I recognize that many of the priorities, even that I've included, will need to be implemented in phases. For example, we're not building a new library in University City tomorrow, but that may be something that we've called for sometimes decades and that we will need to make progress towards. So again, this step is just the beginning of the budget process, and we are currently crafting this resolution as we have today without all of the financial information that's going to be necessary. I'll take the additional 3 minutes to make effective and efficient decisions about how we choose to allocate scarce taxpayer resources. And I think as we progress throughout the process with additional information, again, we'll have the opportunities to really significantly refine our asks. With all of that in mind, I had conferred with the Office of the IBA leading into the Budget Committee's consideration of this item. And at the time, the committee ultimately included language that requested that the IBA provide updated revenue projections in our next call memo to all council offices in order to ensure that we could all be informed of our next revenue updates that we have following, even especially next week, so that this council can make its appropriate adjustments to its priority memos heading into January. So with that said, I am happy to offer a motion for the staff's recommendation on today's item. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Okay, we've got a motion to approve the action in front of us. We'll now turn to Councilmember Foster.
Yes, thank you, Council President, and thank you again, Charles, to your office and your team for all the work that goes into this. I think I provided comments at the Budget Committee. I think my colleague, Councilmember Lee, recapped the discussion at committee. So again, I'll just say thank you, and I will second the motion.
Right, thank you, Councilmember Foster. We've got a motion and a second. Councilmember Whitburn.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you to the Office of the Independent Budget Analyst for all of your work in reviewing the budget memos and compiling this resolution. Also want to thank all of our District 3 neighborhoods for engaging with my office on budget priorities that are reflected in our budget memo, whether it was through our budget survey or emailing your feedback or providing comments here today. Your input has been invaluable in this effort. And for the people who live around First and Market in the Marina District downtown, your advocacy has led to progress toward improving that left turn. And I appreciate you being here to emphasize the urgency of that. Improving that left turn is included in my budget memo, and the city has begun the process of getting this done. It's currently in the engineering phase. It has been designated as a capital improvement project. It is partially funded. So there is still some additional funding to identify and some work to do, but it is in the planning and engineering phase right now. And certainly with the sound of crashes on a all too frequent basis at that intersection, the urgency of getting it done is real, and I appreciate you being here to emphasize that as we take care of that issue. The high cost of housing is another budget priority that was cited by many District 3 residents. In particular, the fact that the high cost of housing is driving more people into homelessness, especially seniors on fixed incomes, creating more affordable housing as a long-term solution and expanding shelter options to provide people a place to stay in the short term are proven paths to address this humanitarian crisis. I am encouraged by the broad support from San Diegans and my council colleagues who have highlighted these issues in their own budget memos, and we are continuing to make progress as we speak. This morning, I joined the council president and the mayor to announce 363 new shelter beds. That follows our announcement on Friday of 161 additional supportive housing units. And prior to that, we announced the expansion of our safe sleeping sites. So we're putting our current budget to work to help more people get off the streets and into shelter and supportive housing or safe sleeping sites. And we will need to continue that investment in the coming budget cycle so we can continue to make progress on this issue. Of course, in addition to making housing more affordable and reducing homelessness and improving the safety of our intersections, there are many other needs. District 3 residents want clean neighborhoods, of course, safe neighborhoods, and improved infrastructure. And these priorities are all reflected in the budget memo that was submitted at the IBA. So thank you again for all the work on that, and thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilmember Whitburn. Council President Pro Tem LaCava.
Thank you, Council President. I'll certainly be supportive of the motion, but I too want to thank the IBA and the entire team for the good work you do in accepting our memos and trying to digest them and put them in some kind of organized format because we all approach it in a slightly different way, but you do a very good job and we appreciate that extra work. I also want to thank the public for sharing your priorities today, as well as those who have shared their priorities over the past several weeks, with a special shout out to our community planning groups who organize structured conversations to identify neighborhood infrastructure and operational priorities. As the IBA identified and my colleagues mentioned, it is no doubt, no surprise that we have collectively agreed to protect the basics, public safety, addressing homelessness, and of course, infrastructure, which also remains #1 through every single neighborhood in our city. I also want to thank the IBA for highlighting the climate action priorities, which often can be achieved through many of the other priorities like infrastructure, stormwater, and more. And what I did note is that some confusion out in the public as well as in the media about these memos that we produce at this very early stage. As is our annual practice with these September memos, the memos do not reflect the totality of our city's $2 billion general fund, nor do they attempt to balance competing priorities. It is a very narrow itemization of district priorities dependent on adequate resources. And I appreciate the IBA continuing to remind us that a lot of these priorities were dependent on not only action from next week's sales tax measure, but also continuing support from state and federal sources through grants. And as was highlighted by Councilmember Lee, and I appreciate him doing that, we do submit this budget memo before we get the year-end report for FY 2024, which we just heard today, before we get the first quarter report on the FY 2025 budget, and before we get the 5-year outlook, which is anticipated to be released in December. And certainly the last revised outlook forecasted a $234 million shortfall in FY 26, although it doesn't reflect some of the mitigation measures that we expect that will come to fruition. So I certainly support recognizing the IBA's work, thoughtfully consolidating the council priorities, and giving important context with them for submittal to the mayor and the mayor's team for developing the FY 26 budget. As was mentioned, our next opportunity will be in January, when we should have a lot more information and knowing that our January memos can be crafted with more accurate understanding of our physical reality. And I'd also ask us to, having done the September memos for a couple of years now, kind of reflect on the value that they bring to this whole budget conversation. They certainly require a lot of work by each of our council offices, require a lot of work by the office of the IBA. And as I mentioned, I think we've all seen a little bit of confusion out in the public and in the media exactly what they mean and how to characterize them going forward. So with that, again, thank you for the good work of the IBA, and I certainly am supportive of the motion. And I should also mention, I also appreciate including those items that have 4 council members in support. I think I may have come up with that idea way back when, but I think it's important for the mayor and the mayor's team to understand which ones might actually be bumped up once we have a better understanding of the total package, resources, and expenditures. So again, with that, I'll be supporting the motion, and I appreciate Councilmember Lee's work on the Budget Committee.
Thank you, Council President Pro Tem. Councilmember Von Wilper.
Thank you very much to our IBAs always for the work that you're doing. In addition to the budget, you have many other projects that we tasked you with, including labor negotiations. So thank you very much for putting these together. As my colleagues have said, we don't know the full financial picture going forward. This is our wish list. If we could wave a magic wand and hopefully have everything we'd like. I, though, deliberately did not include everything I'd like to prioritize because I noted we don't know the fiscal environment coming out. So when we do in January, I anticipate my budget priorities to have changed based on what we're seeing in our bank account. I also wanted to thank folks for prioritizing public safety infrastructure. That's what I think we need to be focusing on. We have folks here who are having to come to a city council meeting because they need help with traffic collision. We've had many in our residents too. And Councilor Whitburn, it takes a long time. I hear you. We had a elementary school that needed a stop sign, and I couldn't believe how long it took us. And so thank you for being here, but that is a priority of us at council is better infrastructure and public safety for all of you. And so I want to make sure that we continue to plug that, which we have unanimous support in here for our public safety, for our infrastructure. The wildfire outside many homes in Scripps Ranch was knocked down within hours because of our fire helicopters we've invested in. We need to make sure our residents are safe and the infrastructure we provide for them are safe. I also have a slight different opinion from my colleague, the President Pro Tem, including the 4-person submitted items, because if we make everything a priority to the mayor's office, then nothing is a priority. And we don't have that much voice in the budget process until it comes to us and we can vote on it. And so I do believe we should only be putting in majority supported items. I mean, some of the 4-person items are my items, and I've supported some of these in my budget memo, but I still don't think we should be calling these out as things that the whole council supports when they don't. So, Charles, can I ask, does this motion mean that you will delineate which is unanimous, which is 7, which is 4-person?
Each priority is delineated in our report, which item has 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4 members of support. The motion that's put forward you is to say that these are all council's priorities, and then once it's transmitted to the mayor, the additional information in our report is essentially transmitted with it. So he should be able, and the Department of Finance should be able to look through and see this particular priority received support from all council members. So stormwater had report from all council members, street repair had support from all council members, parks had support from all council members, pedestrian safety and sidewalks had support for all council members. Climate action plan, sorry, Councilmember Wakava, had support from 8 council members. Other items had support from fewer, but those are each listed in our report.
Okay, so then what is the effect of changing the resolution? What's the practical or actual effect?
It is saying that this council as a body also believes that those items that were mentioned in 4 memos are also priorities of this council. There is a balance to be struck between just saying everything is important, because everything that the city does is important, at least to some folks, as well as limiting the number of priorities that you have. If this council only had 2 priorities, will probably have a greater impact on development of the budget than if this council has 2,000 priorities, and I'm taking a very small number and a very large number that you're not at either of those, right? That's a balance to strike. It's something that this council and our office will continue to work towards.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. Well, I will vote for this because it's in, wish list item, but I do not believe we should be including 4-person in the resolution as if they have majority support, because they don't. So they could in the future. But again, the more priorities we put in, the fewer priorities we're going to get, because if everything's a priority, then nothing is a priority for them. So, but I'll vote for it because I will. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Von Wilpert. Appreciate the work on this, obviously from Charles and your team. Thanks to the Budget Committee for going through this and doing your work. When I think about the priorities that are listed here from the council, either as a whole or just kind of what's listed here as priorities, I like to think about what that would result in. From my vantage point, that would mean a safer community, a community where fewer folks were struggling to get by or not getting by and not able to stay in their homes. We'd have and more services and the infrastructure that folks want and deserve in their neighborhoods. So obviously, this at the end of the day, the decisions that we make next year are going to be driven by the resources that we have in front of us, and there are a lot of very, very important variables that will determine what those resources look like. But I do think that I like the direction that we're headed in terms of priorities. Councilmember Von Wilper, I was listening to you, and I think there's like an interesting, I think it creates an interesting opportunity for how we approach this resolution versus January. One benefit to this is that because we're limited in who we can talk to amongst ourselves, this is a chance for the council to see where there was 4, but maybe we weren't able to talk to another colleague to get that support to 5. Now we all know what those are. And if they're not there in January, still after us having seen them, probably more reason not to include them then. I think I appreciate knowing what those are now, just because of the limitations that we have as a result of the Brown Act. This is the first time that we as a group get to have this conversation, and it does kind of, in a more transparent way, present to the public and to ourselves what's kind of a borderline majority, and then what obviously has reached critical mass. And when I think about those items, it's oftentimes things that have been on our radar for a number of years, and through multiple budget cycles and budget conversations, we've now come to a unanimous agreement or near unanimous agreement that those are priorities of ours. So we're still, I think we're all still kind of learning this new process with this second memo, and hope that at a minimum it does allow for more conversation amongst one another, to see one another's ideas, for the mayor to see which direction we're headed in, and for the public to make sure that they know that we're hearing the feedback that we get and doing our best to advocate for it. So we've got our motion from Councilmember Lee. It was seconded by Councilmember Foster. I don't see any additional requests to speak to this item. Clerk, if you'd please call the roll.
The voting system, please cast your vote. That does pass unanimously 8-0 with Councilmember Campbell absent.
All right, thank you, Clerk. Let's hear item S400, please.
Item S400 is an informational item. It is the fiscal year 2024 year-end State of the Capital Improvements Program, CIP, and State of Construction reports. If you'd like to speak on this item, please be sure to submit your speaker slip to the high lectern, and/or if you are participating remotely, please be sure to press *9 or the raise your hand icon. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. All right, once our presenters are ready, please introduce yourself for the record and let us know which time you'd like for this presentation.
Good afternoon. I'm Karen McGriff, Assistant Director with the Engineering and Capital Projects Department. We'll need about 20 minutes, please.
Please proceed.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Karen McGriff, and I am the Assistant Director of the Finance and Employee Services Branch of the Engineering and Capital Projects Department. With me today is Samira Palisayed, who is our Program Manager for our Project Management Office, overseeing our CIP finances. And we are here to present the fiscal year 2024 year-end State of CIP and Construction Report. This report is presented twice a year as an informational item as required by Council Policy 31, CIP Transparency. The report covers a period of July 1, 2023 through June 30, 2024, and provides an overview of the city's entire capital improvements program, where engineering is responsible for delivering over 82% of the program, and the remainder of the projects are managed by other departments. In the report, we also review the status of some major projects, provide a high-level overview of the programmatic expenditures, and review general CIP performance metrics during fiscal year 24. We will take a quick look at emergencies declared in fiscal year 24. And lastly, we will highlight just a few of the project awards received in the fiscal year. And with that, I will now turn it over to Samira.
Thank you, Karen. The CIP program and what we accomplish in any given year is dependent at least in part on the funding that is made available in that year. You can see on this slide that with the exception of the COVID recovery year, our city investment in infrastructure continues to grow. The fiscal year 2024 adopted CIP budget was $704.1 million, and various council actions throughout the fiscal year increased this amount by $506.8 million to a total of $1.2 billion in new funding dedicated to the CIP. Nearly 2/3 of the increase comes from the addition of debt funding to support the stormwater WIFIA program. For the first time in city history, the capital program expenditures have exceeded $1 billion. There was a nearly 40% increase in year-over-year spending in the capital program, which resulted in the city investing $1.04 billion on citywide infrastructure during fiscal year 2024. The $1 billion in expenditures are shown here, broken down by asset owner. As you can see, the largest expenditures are for the public utilities assets, making up nearly 65% of program activity, and nearly half of the public utilities investments are related to the Pure Water program. The next largest groups of investments are for the transportation and parks and recreation related projects. Many stormwater projects are currently in the design stage, and expenditure activity will continue to increase in the coming fiscal years. The dollars expended in fiscal year 2024 occurred across 1,388 active projects and improved infrastructure for 13 asset owning departments. The project count is shown here by asset owner. As you can see on the graph, the CIP's largest clients are the public utilities and transportation departments, followed by Parks and Rec and stormwater departments and others. This indicates a level of collaboration and coordination between the asset owners and the city right away. Performance measures help to assess CIP achievements during a fiscal year, and by comparing annual performance can help guide the program toward improved results. This table compares measures from fiscal years 2023 and 2024. Nearly all metrics show positive improvements. However, there are some areas that need to be monitored closely, which we will discuss in the coming slides. By far, our most visible and most used asset is our street network. In fiscal year 2024, 75 miles of asphalt overlay were completed, which is 44% more overlay work than in the prior fiscal year, and the highest delivery level in more than 5 years. Asphalt overlay efforts led by ENCP, combined with the slurry seal efforts led by the Transportation Department, resulted in over 300 miles of roadway paving improvements during the fiscal year, and a difference that you can start to see and feel throughout the city. Shown here are graphs demonstrating the annual and 5-year targets for the water and sewer main replacement programs in red, and ENCP's progress toward achieving those goals in blue. As you can see, we are trending below the goal line and are not projecting to meet the original target established in fiscal year 2020. This shortfall is largely due to challenges encountered on several projects, including bidders who failed to meet EOC requirements. There are also projects where the bids received were much higher than the engineer's estimate, or they received no bids at all. All of these complications result in delayed project implementation. Switching gears to project highlights, several projects that reached a major milestone during the year are highlighted in the report itself. We will showcase just a few of those projects in the upcoming slides. It is important to note that project completion schedules depend on funds being available as the projects advance through the delivery process. The first project that we want to highlight is the Oak Park Library, located in Council District 4. This project began the advertised bid phase for construction in fiscal year 2024. When complete in 2028, the community will have a new 20,000 square foot library. Fire Station 48, located in Council District 5, has also started the advertised and bid phase for construction. When complete in 2029, Fire Station 48 will be a new 11,500 square foot station located on Carmel Valley Road and serving the Black Mountain Ranch community and surrounding areas. Last but not least, for the project highlights, construction for the Buyer Park Development Project in Council District 8 is ongoing and is anticipated to be complete in 2026. This project will result in a new 8-acre park area and park amenities for the San Ysidro community. With so many projects entering the advertise and bid stage, constant engagement with the industry is needed to help ensure successful ongoing contract awards and execution. ENCP hosts regularly scheduled meetings with SLBE, ELBE contractors, as well as our consulting and construction partners. In fiscal year 2024, ENCP also coordinated 2 outreach events with the San Diego Building and Construction Trades Council. Additionally, something that is not reflected on the slide, ENCP also participated in multiple industry events hosted by other organizations, such as the American Public Works Association, Associated General Contractors of America, and the Construction Network, to further increase awareness of our program contracting opportunities and processes. All of these events provide opportunities to communicate updates about the CIP program, as well as upcoming contracting opportunities. We provide 6-month look-ahead dashboards, as well as interactive maps to the attendees to further highlight upcoming contracting opportunities across the city's 9 council districts. This enhanced communication method has been very well received in the construction and consult industry meetings and helps to further our efforts with implementing the CIP transparency policy. Now shifting focus to our construction-related activities. To help manage peak workloads or to provide inspection services for projects, such as the Pure Water, that require unique expertise, construction management teams have executed as-needed CM consultant contracts. CM teams are structured to provide construction management services for all possible types of CIP projects and inspection services. This table describes the status of the current as-needed construction management contracts in fiscal year 2024. In fiscal year 2024, ENCP issued a total of 113 notice to proceeds on CIP projects to begin construction activities, compared to 90 in fiscal year 2023. ENCP also issued 43 notices of completions in fiscal year 2024. As we all remember, fiscal year 2024 saw a few significant weather events. As a result, the city initiated projects for 17 new distinct emergency projects. 15 of these were stormwater related and valued at nearly $40 million. One was a Parks and Recreation related slope failure valued at nearly $3 million. And one was related to a public utilities facility for $850,000. Additional details are available in the report itself. Advancing the climate action plan is a priority for the CIP across multiple departments and types of projects. The council policy on CIP prioritization gives higher weights to projects with CAP considerations and positive impacts. Shown here are the number of projects by CAP energy category and also a count of active CIP projects with EV-related parking spaces. As older projects initiated prior to CAP adoption complete and more CAP relevant projects are initiated, we will see more CAP and EV take place. I will now pass it back to Karen for closing remarks.
Thank you. As you've seen, fiscal year 24 was a busy and productive year, but it was not without its challenges. And while fiscal year 25 is trending to be similarly successful, we are not approaching it in the same way. We are proactively adapting and innovating to make sure that we don't just maintain the status quo, but improve upon it. We are focusing on learning from our challenges to improve the outcomes of our objectives. We also recognize that the size and complexity of the CIP program requires us to be adaptable, leveraging new technologies and adopting proven efficient processes. This adaptability will better support the city's AMDs as they continue to update and refine their capital infrastructure needs. This year, we are keenly focused on increasing our pool of contractors by continuing our outreach and engagement with the industry to help ensure the successful delivery of our different programs. This effort focuses on addressing the issues experienced last year of receiving fewer bidders than expected on key contracting opportunities. Another area that we focus on is the improvement of the transparency of our CIP program and customer service. As part of this effort, we will lead the development of a consistent level of customer service for all work performed in the public right-of-way, regardless of who is performing the work. And finally, we will continue to partner with supporting departments such as the Department of Finance, Purchasing and Contracting, ComD, City Attorneys, and SUMO to improve the responsiveness and the delivery of your capital improvements program. I also wanted to take this time to provide just a few examples of how engineering is recognized as the regional leader of its award-winning capital improvements program. In fiscal year 2024, ENCP received 20 project awards, and we also received the Quality Based Selection Championship Award by the American Council of Engineering Companies. This table shows the number of awards that we received across 7 different agencies. And we highlighted these projects to you previously during the Budget Review Committee meetings just a few months ago. So today I'm only going to highlight those projects that received multiple awards. The first project is the Gilman Drive Storm Drain Emergency Project. This was not a standard stormwater emergency project by any measure. As you can see by the images, the 132-inch pipe was a challenge due to both its location and depth. Approximately 70 linear feet of the failed pipe was replaced with new corrugated metal pipe and is lined with reinforced concrete. The American Society of Civil Engineers has awarded this project the Outstanding Flood Management Project Award for 2024, and the American Public Works Association awarded the project the Outstanding Disaster or Emergency Construction Project of the Year. Another project, the Tecolote Shores North and South Improvements Project, received 3 awards, including the Landscape Architecture Orchid Award, the American Public Works Association Park Project of the Year, and the American Society of Landscape Architects Outstanding Parks, Trails, and Recreation Award. And finally, a project more than 20 years in the making, the West Mission Bay Drive Bridge Replacement Project. This nearly $200 million project received 5 different awards from 3 different organizations. These include the Outstanding Bridge Project, Project of the Year, the Engineering Excellence, the Transportation Project of the Year, and also a National Recognition Award. These are just a few of our award-winning projects, and we look forward to adding more in fiscal year 25. I'd like to thank this council for funding the historic levels of infrastructure investment and supporting the CIP spending that has enabled us to deliver for residents like never before. We look forward to continuing to prioritize our infrastructure in every neighborhood in the coming years. And this concludes our presentation.
All right, thank you so much. Let's hear public comment, please.
Thank you, Council President. I see no public comment speakers here in council chambers. I'm starting the 5-minute timer and going to the original. If you can please unmute, you'll have 2 minutes.
It's really sad to hear you guys talk about these awards, and for your, storm emergency project, flood management, whatever award, when people have lost everything. And you're sitting here talking about awards like, we did such a great job. It's your fault they lost everything. It's your fault that the infrastructure wasn't upkept. It's so sad to virtue signal like that, like we're doing so good, we got these awards. Well, I'm pretty sure the people that are still trying to pick up the pieces of their lives, that's almost like a stab in the back to them because they still haven't even been able to recover fully. And you're sitting here talking about awards that you're getting because you fail. Like if you didn't fail, you wouldn't have got that award. So it's just interesting to see how you guys do those things to kind of, prop up yourselves to act like, well, look at what we're doing. We get awards for it. But if you look at everything on a whole, it's like people are they're still trying. And I don't see any end in sight in that. Like how many years is it going to take for them to make up, get their lives back, while you're collecting awards, while you failed miserably. And yeah, it's interesting. And to see that, your 17 emergency projects cost us $40 million. If you would keep up with the things that need to be upkept, then we wouldn't be in these types of positions. And with with the Pure Water project, that thing is what's it going to be, 10 billion by the time you guys pretend to be done? It's a really good way to put money in people's pockets, which is so sad because that's what a lot of these projects do. It doesn't even mean they have to be completed or done right. As long as you put slurry seal on an asphalt overlay, you'll have to keep doing the work. It just gives people more jobs, but it doesn't actually make things better.
Your time has concluded. Our next speaker is Megan Stewart. If you can please unmute. Megan Stewart, I can unmute for you. There you go.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council President and Council members. My name is Megan Stewart. I have experience in social work, and I'm here to talk about an important yet overlooked public health issue that includes the lack of support for parents. As you know, we are facing a disturbing trend in rising youth mental health challenges and substance use in San Diego. These issues make it clear that young people need stable, healthy, and well-supported adults in their lives to help them navigate through these challenges. A traditional Maasai greeting from Kenya asks, "How are the children?" This question reminds us that the health of our society rests on how well we care for its youngest members. And it is equally essential to recognize that the well-being of children is directly tied to the well-being of their parents and caregivers. U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy recently highlighted this connection, urging a shift in how we value and prioritize parental mental health. The pressures on today's parents are enormous. Economic uncertainty, social isolation, and the influence of social media on family dynamics are creating challenges that directly affect parents and thus their children. Programs like Parents as Teachers may be beneficial. Home visiting services can provide support to families and help parents learn how to foster their children's emotional, cognitive, and social health. Studies show that these programs significantly reduce stress, improve family economic well-being, and boost outcomes for both parents and children. So when we ask, how are the children in San Diego? Let us work towards being able to answer with, the children are healthy, high achieving, and doing well because their parents are supported. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That does conclude public comment on item S400.
Right, thank you so much. Let's begin the conversation with Councilmember Whitburn.
Thank you very much, Council President, and I want to thank the Engineering and Capital Projects team for today's presentation and also for presenting at our Active Transportation and Infrastructure Committee meeting earlier this month. I really appreciate your commitment to streamlining our processes. That has really enhanced both the effectiveness and the efficiency of our CIP delivery, as shown by the number of active projects that are currently in the pipeline. From roads and bridges to parks and fire stations, these projects all are critical to fostering safe and vibrant and accessible neighborhoods throughout our city. I want to congratulate our city staff on all of the award-winning projects, including one that was mentioned previously but not today, Children's Park downtown. It demonstrates what we can accomplish when our community comes together and collaborates to enhance the quality of life for all residents. From the playground there to the dog park, it has really been wonderful to see so many people enjoying that amenity. In fact, Children's Park was recently honored with an Orchid Award for landscape architecture by the 2024 Orchids and Onions jury, a well-deserved recognition and yet another point of pride for downtown. So thank you for everybody who worked on that project and all the other projects that are going on in our city. And I look forward to building on this momentum in the years ahead. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilmember Whitburn. All right, Council President Pro Tem LaCava.
Thank you, Council President. I too want to join in thanking Engineering Capital Projects for bringing this positive update. Thank you for partnering with me on customer service standards. This report certainly reflects the city efforts of city employees to ensure all neighborhoods have functioning infrastructure. And I think it's important to highlight these awards are not about this administration. It is about the good rank and file staff who don't decide policy, do not decide budget, but show up every day and do very good work. And to take a moment to recognize the good work of individuals and groups of individual employees, I think is worth a few minutes of our time to hear about. So I know you didn't talk about all the projects that got awards, but I think it is important to recognize the good work of our city employees that are delivering for us every single day. It's up to the council and the mayor to figure out the policies and the budget to give you all the resources to figure out how we protect every neighborhood. And while we often focus on potholes or streetlights that are dark, we see extraordinary work by Engineering Capital Projects to deliver over $1 billion in over 1,300 infrastructure projects. Certainly, this is a department that's getting it done and trying to catch up for the lack of work over many, many years in the past. And as you mentioned, there's been certainly on top of the regularly scheduled projects, you pivot and respond to the emergency as they pop up. So often in some of our newer communities, including District 1, it is really emergency repairs that come to the forefront. And the city has responded well, and it is important to note that those become some of the most challenging projects where you have to go in and do a repair work whether it's the initial design, it's understanding what happens when you open up that trench and see what's actually going on under there, and the kind of repairs that have to be done while protecting the surrounding areas. I also appreciate you taking the bit of time to talk about CIP projects related to our climate action plan, which we have a very ambitious agenda to achieve. Can you talk a little bit more about the progress on some of those climate action projects?
I'm actually going to use a phone a friend. We've got Heather Werner online from Sustainability and Mobility. I'm going to let the expert fill you in.
Hi, Council Member. Yes, this is Heather Werner, the Interim Director for Sustainability and Mobility. So ZEMBOP in general, we have a couple of different phases for making sure that those policies are applied to projects. The checklist that we have developed that is used by all city projects and development, mainly ECP, as they're developing a project, goes through and creates a solution for them to know which parts of the policy have to be applied for any project that they're building. That is included in their submission to SIPRAC. So those requirements are kind of identified at even the beginning scoping of a project and then carried through. If there's any exceptions or exemptions at the time, we do capture those. You'll note in the full CIP report, there's a number of different kind of CAP related and specific ZEMBOP related items that are tracked in our project tracking to know which elements are included in any project. And we do have a few projects in there that are noted as exceptions. The ones we have now left in the process either are exceptions because of backup diesel generators that are allowed for emergency locations like our fire stations and police stations, or they were already far enough along in the design process that they were already exempt when the initial policy was passed. And so we stay in really close coordination with all of the ECP staff as we're developing projects to make sure that all of our projects going forward align to those policies.
All right, thank you for that, Heather. And it does remind me to highlight that we opened up Station 52, which is an all-electric fire station and with a electric fire engine. And next month, we're going to open up Pacific Highlands Ranch, a project that got started under more conventional design and then was pulled back to become an all-electric one going forward. And I was reflecting on this in public comment this morning that we laser focus on climate action, but a lot of things we're doing is climate resiliency, and whether it is building new piers or repairing the existing piers we have off of our beaches, sidewalks, et cetera. Climate resiliency is also a big part of what I know Engineering Capital Project is focused on, so I thank you for that. So again, thank you for the very good work. Thank you for this detailed report. I know it takes a lot of time to put these reports together, so I very much appreciate it in keeping us and the public informed. And that concludes my comments. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Council President Pro Tem. Councilmember Von Wolpert.
Thank you very much for the work on this and the presentation. It's great to see that our CIP is increasing every year because our infrastructure backlog for so many years has been underfunded and underperforming. So I'm really glad to see that we are continuing as a council and this mayor and this administration to push because the residents want to see their taxpayer dollars being used to provide the infrastructure that we need for our city. So thank you for continuing to make sure we're as efficient as we can be. The $38 million hit for emergency storm drains is hard to swallow. These are emergencies. We cannot not address them. And when the ground opened up and a sinkhole happens because the prior city governments has not funded replacement of these important pieces of infrastructure, it costs us more to then replace them because we have to take the emergency bids. We don't get to do a lowest bid contract. So we can't not fix them, but I know it's a huge hit. So we've been talking a lot about, whether to in-house more storm drain repair folks and whatnot. And so is there more discussion about whether or not we should keep bidding these out or in-housing more people?
Luis may want to add into this, but while he's walking up, I'll start it. I think a lot of that has to do with the type of the emergency, the specifics, how deep it is, how much room there is to work with, the size of pipe, but I'll let Luis fill.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Luis Shar, Assistant Director, Engineering Capital Projects Department. So our emergency projects, once they get to that point, many of them are in inaccessible areas, difficult to move forward and make repairs. However, for many areas that we know with preventative work, we can get to a point where we will not experience, hopefully, those same type of emergencies. So as far as where city forces could dedicate their staff in discussions with Stormwater Department, there are areas that are in the right of way that are more accessible, that can be accessed and performed by city forces, while there's more complex areas that get reserved for outside contractors. So I think it's a balance of both teams that can help the system improve over time.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the pictures are very helpful because they show how hard it is to get to those areas. And also about the mention that sometimes we have projects out for bid that receive no bids at all. Are we speaking to the construction community about why they're not bidding? Have any thoughts on that?
Very much so. We've been doing an extensive amount of outreach this last year because we have seen that the industry, from discussions with them through 2024 through now, is really at capacity as far as the work that they're able to perform in the region. Some contractors have noted that they do have actually bonding capacity, but they can't find staff with experience to deliver other projects. So it's a combination of several things as to why some of our projects are getting less bidders than before. For those that have received zero bids, yes, we have gone back to those specific contractors to pull those bidding packages to see exactly why it is that they declined to putting a bid for these projects. Some of it had to do with the complexity of the project, but also many of them went back to just the fact that they have so much work going on at this time and they're stretched very thin to take on these larger, more complex projects.
Got it. Okay. I mean, I know we are embarking on the biggest infrastructure project in the city's history with pure water, let alone everything else we're doing. And other cities also want to build roads and libraries and things. So that's a workforce development issue that we certainly need to take on. I know our unions are doing a lot of great work to get people in the trades, but thank you for the feedback. It's helpful to know so that we can also reach out to folks and say, what do you need to help build our city projects? And then another question is about right sizing, making sure that we're right sizing the CIP for PUD. We're really harping on the County Water Authority right now for having invested in projects and long-term contracts that are now going to send ratepayers water rates much higher than we're comfortable with. So how are we ensuring that we are making sure we're only using what we need and we're not charging ratepayers more than we need to?
So I'll start maybe answering this question. One thing we started talking about, or actually earlier today, is our project size. Should we start looking at providing different opportunities? So not every project is going to be these larger $20 million projects that require a lot of resources, that take up a lot of the existing funding for those larger projects, instead of maybe looking at smaller bundled projects so that we can go and actually focus on different areas that also need attention. So we're trying to position those projects to be a little bit smarter and nimble to provide more opportunities to see where we want to put our funding so that we can hit those neighborhoods that really need attention for their infrastructure. I'll pass it on to Karen for the financing side.
I also think that Public Utilities has a very well-established, condition assessment. They're very in tune with the state of their assets, and the life cycle of those assets and the timing at which they need to be replaced. I know that a lot of the focus is going to be shifting towards all of our regulatory requirements, the pump stations, the dams, really focusing on those, knowing that our overall pipeline condition assessment may be satisfactory. I won't say amazing.
Okay, got it. And I know we were discussing also a kind of master plan that we were going to do for PUD, but that item hasn't come yet, as far as I know. Okay, is it coming soon? Oh, we don't know. Okay, all right. I'm happy to ask that offline. May I have an extra 2 minutes, please? I'm almost done. Thank you for the update on Fire Station 48. Our firefighters have been asking me for a while about that one. So can we get notified when it's actually going to be awarded?
I think that one may actually reach the threshold that it will be coming to city council for approval when it comes. So yes, absolute notification.
Okay, fantastic. Very much excited about pushing that one forward. Also, Lake Hodges Dam, is the 10% design study done yet?
I believe that's still ongoing at this time, but I will check with the team themselves to get the actual status and send it to your office, so we can provide you an estimate of time for completion.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for working on preventative maintenance now too, replacing our water mains that are aging and storm drains. And Bethany Bezak's done a great job trying to revamp our sidewalk repair program and our pavement management plan. So everything is trending in the right direction in terms of responsible stewardship of our major assets. And I appreciate you all for your work on this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Von Wilpert. I don't see any additional requests to speak. I do want to just say a quick thank you for the work on the Aldine storm drain. That's a really important connector in our community, and just very appreciative that that work got done. So thank you for that. I don't see any additional requests to speak to this. I'll say thank you again. And with that, we will now move to non-agenda public comment. Clerk,
Thank
please
you, Council
proceed.
President. I do not see any non-agenda public comment speakers here in council chambers, but just to remind folks, per Rule 2.7, non-agenda public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. If there are 8 or more speakers on a single topic, the maximum time for the topic will be 16 minutes. If you are in chambers, please submit your speaker slip. If you're joining us virtually, please raise your hand to speak by tapping the raise your hand icon, or if you are a call-in participant, *9. Again, I don't see any non-agenda public comment speakers here in council chambers. I've started the 5-minute timer. Going to those participating remotely, we currently have 5 speakers, starting with Barbara Gordon. If you can please unmute, you'll have 2 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. Each year, National Red Ribbon Week is celebrated October 23rd to the 31st. Our schools and youth support organizations across San Diego use this time to engage kids in dialogue about the importance of making positive life choices and avoiding the temptation to use tobacco, marijuana, alcohol, and other drugs. Did you know that 13 is the average age when kids try these substances for the first time? We need to arm our young people with the right information that will support them in making good choices. City council members, you can play an important role if you have laws that do not promote or encourage tobacco retailers, marijuana storefronts, or alcohol outlets. I urge this council to develop strategies that support making good decisions for our young people. It's vital to help young people to develop life skills that will help them thrive. Research shows that if young people discover their passions and are directly engaged in compelling ways with people they look up to and trust, they are more likely to make positive life choices and much less likely to choose drugs, alcohol, tobacco, or marijuana. I urge the council to recognize the role you play in making our community a strong and healthy environment for our young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Terry Ann Skelly. If you can please unmute.
Good afternoon, San Diego City Council. I came this afternoon as a parent of young adult sons and planning group member. I've followed the city's unfortunate idea to add marijuana businesses to our city. I have joined other parents in the city, the county, and the state who have shown that big tobacco has spent millions, billions marketing e-cigarettes and vaping devices as tools for relieving stress. And now big marijuana has done the same thing. When young people start vaping, the nicotine or marijuana gives them a short little buzz. They puff and they puff again to recreate that feeling. But nicotine is highly addictive, and soon they may feel anxious, stressed, or depressed again as their body experiences nicotine withdrawals. Many teens say they picked up e-cigarettes as a way to deal with stress and anxiety, only to realize much later that vaping can make their mental health worse. Recent research suggests that the highly concentrated THC found in marijuana vaping devices is also just as addictive, also dramatically affecting their mental health. Perhaps the city could look at fees charged to marijuana businesses or a tax that could fund prevention messages, which would emphasize the hazards with marijuana vaping and consumption to young adults, their families, neighborhoods, and society in general. Thank you for hearing my concerns and for your consideration this afternoon.
Thank you. Next is Blair Beekman. If you can please unmute.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thanks for the meeting today. I guess for me, a big concept I'm trying to better understand is the concepts of peace. And how can we really talk and work towards the concepts of peace and positive sustainability at the local level? We don't hear those words so much anymore. And I think we can still work towards that. If we do, I think it would actually be an awesome way to help address the world and just help the world a lot. And I'm really afraid that you guys are cowering into, our national level, who is just continual war around the world. We learned some good practices, good sensibility from 9/11 over the years to just slowly not work that way anymore. And then voila, we've got 2 more wars going, and it's like we forgot all our lessons from 9/11 or from that era. We really were in a serious mode to limit the future of war and to question war and to question, that just because one side wants to go to war or create terror, that doesn't mean necessarily that we can't negotiate with them. We don't understand that lesson yet. We are still at the point where if they have created terror, we have to fight them. There's no other choice. I don't think that's the full right approach anymore. We used to believe in that. I think we have to question that. I think Israel has to question that and know that Hamas wasn't trying to, start an end to Israel, but just to simply ask, can we end what's going on in Gaza? And that's just the terribleness that was going on pre-wartime. So we have to work on this stuff together. Please work on openness and accountability at the local level and community participation. Those fight war. It ends war. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kathleen Lippett. If you can please unmute.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council. My name is Kathleen Lippett. As a researcher of addictive drugs, I wanted to share yet another massive study that involves 63 studies and nearly 440,000 youth. It found that marijuana use during adolescence was tied to worse school outcomes, less likelihood of high school completion, university enrollment, post-secondary degree attainment, and increased school dropouts and absenteeism. Additionally, chronic use among adolescents is linked to long-term changes in the brain architecture. An earlier speaker mentioned traditional greeting that asks first, how are the children? The Maasai greeting does this even from warriors that don't have children. They ask the same thing. It is a wise community standard. It is one well worth considering that for every policy that you support, you ask this question of yourself. How will this affect the children? We hope city leaders will appreciate that the pressures that teens are facing today are influenced by pro-drug use messaging in their communities, such as marijuana storefronts and billboards throughout the city. Billboards promoting marijuana use as healthy, normal, or even harmless. Please do not help the marijuana industry ensure its long-term viability by targeting our children and adolescents. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. And our last speaker is the original. The 5-minute timer has concluded. If you can please unmute.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see how things go next Tuesday. It's going to possibly be pretty chaotic depending on how things kind of go. And as we know, there is always voter fraud and election fraud happening every time. And it's like we just kind of repeat history by playing the same game over and over and acting like we're going to get a different result. But, I just want to inform you guys because, we know that there are illegal aliens that have been signed up to vote, and that is illegal. And it is through the NGOs that you guys engage with that, are here to help, right? That's why they help facilitate all the things that these people who cross the border illegally are going to need. But when you're aiding and abetting and helping facilitate that, you actually can't hold office. It's the 2023 election code, California election code, election 18, penal provision, chapter 6, corruption of the voting process, article 1, general provisions, section 18, 501. Any public official who knowingly violates any provision of this chapter and thereby aids in any way the illegal casting or attempting to cast a vote, or who convenes convenes to nullify any of the provisions of this chapter in order that fraud may be perpetrated shall forever be disqualified from holding office in the state, and upon conviction shall be sentenced to a state prison for 16 months or 2 or 3 years. So, when you guys knowingly do these things, when you know that this happens, when you do anything that you do that is interfering with the election, and also just whatever, you guys are going to be held accountable. So I would hope that whatever comes forward in the next week, that, you don't engage in that you haven't been. But if so, then, we need to make sure that you guys are held accountable for all of that.
Thank you. That does conclude your time, and that concludes non-agenda public comment for this meeting.
All right. Thank you so much. Do we have anything to report out from closed session?
No, thank you.
Okay, with that, let's adjourn council to the next regularly scheduled council meeting tomorrow, Tuesday, October 29th, 2024 at 10 a.m. Thank you, everyone.